Welcome to City Hall. We'll get started this morning with our invocation at a Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask Councilman Larry McAtee if he'll lead us in the invocation, and afterwards I'll ask Councilman Pete White to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand?
Father, we thank you for the day that you've given us. We thank you for the city that you've given us to live in, for the responsibilities that you've entrusted to our mayor, our city staff, and this council. We pray that what is done this morning would be in line with your will, that we would have the wisdom that only comes from you, that we would make decisions that would move our city forward, that would meet the needs of all our people, and that we would give you the praise and the honor and the glory for what you've done and what you'll continue to do in each of our lives. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We packed this in today.
We'll call the meeting to order and then recess the council meeting, convene as the Finance Committee. Item 1 is to discuss the fiscal year 2010-11 proposed budget, and then we'll have some department presentations. Overall today we'll be hearing from the Public Transportation and Parking Association, the Information Technology Department, and also the Planning Department.
So let's start with Public Transit and Mr. Kane.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Rick Kane, Director of Public Transportation and Parking, and also I serve as Administrator of the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. Before I get started in my presentation, I do want to acknowledge some of our staff members that are here this morning. Mark Pritchard, who is our Assistant Director, Jeannie Smith, who manages our river operations, Melissa Rousey, our Finance Manager, Michael Scroggins, who is our marketing manager and also is assisting me this morning in the PowerPoint presentation, and then Megan Mitchner, who is also part of our marketing department. Also would like to acknowledge two of our COCPA Board of Trustee members that are here, Mr. Chris Kaufman, who serves as chairman of the board, Mr. Dick Lee, who serves as vice chairman of the board and is also chairman of our Transportation Committee. So with that, you will find our department information on page 371 in the budget book, although I do need to tell you that the numbers that I'll be presenting this morning will not match the numbers in the budget book, primarily because the budget book focuses on general fund only, and the full COPPA budget includes other revenue sources besides just the general fund. It's normally part of our process that each year when we begin our budget examination that we reevaluate our LFR mission statement, our issues, and also our strategies. We did that this year and decided that all of them were still appropriate, and so therefore no changes were made in any of those items. However, I do want to start off this morning and highlight a couple of issues and strategies, particularly the first one I think that has particular impact given the financial environment in which we're operating today. Our strategy is to try to get the most passengers on our buses per dollar of operating funding, and we measure this by how many people ride each bus per bus revenue hour. This is one of the criteria among many that we use when we evaluate our route performance, and although we've been successful this year in increasing ridership on that measurement statistic, it's still becoming increasingly hard for us to respond to the growing demand for transit service, also to respond to the different marketing or the market needs that are there, and particularly in light of funding difficulties, it's becoming a major challenge for us. I also want to talk about customer safety, which is of paramount importance to our agency. The measure we use for determining how well we're doing is customer injury claims. These claims can result upon somebody getting on or off a bus. They could result from a vehicle accident, or they could be an incident that occurs on a bus or at one of our transit facilities. Though not all the accidents that occur, in fact, most of the accidents that occur on Metro Transit vehicles are not our fault, we still report it as a customer injury claim if it comes in, and we make no distinction as to whether it's a valid claim or the cause of the claim. Our goal for next year is really to try to continue to build on the momentum that we have continued to realize this year in terms of addressing our strategic results. We'll work to continue to improve reliability for our customers that we serve. This includes continuing our bus replacement program. You might recall last year we actually brought 15 new buses into our fleet. Those were the result of the 2007 GO bond package that was approved by the voters. This year we plan on purchasing 10 additional buses. We are going to be doing that through a combination of GO bond funds and federal grant funds. These 10 buses will be replacing buses that have reached the end of their economic useful life. 3 of the buses that we purchased this year will be alternative fuel vehicles. 2 of them will be CNG buses. The third one will be what's called electric hybrid bus. Whenever you use, and I need to point this out, whenever you use federal money to purchase a bus, the federal requirement is we have to keep that bus in service for 12 years. And when you think about the fact that averagely our buses travel anywhere from 50 to 60,000 miles a year, by the time we're retiring that bus, it's got anywhere from 600 to 700,000 miles on it. So it's critical for us to be able to replace buses in a timely fashion. For years, we've really depended upon discretionary federal funding, or what some people call earmarks, to be able to do that. With the changing environment in Washington right now, putting pressure on that, and in the discussions relative to deficit funding, it's going to put extra pressure on our long-term capital equipment replacement program. The buzzword in Washington right now as it relates to transit talks about maintaining a state of good repair, and this really goes beyond just buses. Our operations and maintenance facility has been undergoing significant renovations, and we will continue to do that this coming year, in part to make put ourselves in a position to be able to operate CNG buses. These facility upgrades were really made possible through 2 sources of funding. One, our normal federal grant funds, and we're also using a significant amount of our American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or stimulus funds, to be able to do that. And through the continued investment in staff training, equipment replacement, and facility upgrades, I feel very comfortable that we're going to continue to make improvements in the reliability of our service that we provide our customers. Greater reliability also means fewer bus breakdowns, and we measure those bus breakdowns by the number of miles between what we term as road calls. Given our focus on reliability, we are much more restrictive in terms of how we evaluate or how we measure a road call versus what the Federal Transit Administration requires of us. If we pull a bus out for service, even if it doesn't impact our customers, if it's not able to complete its normal run through the course of the day, we call it a road call for whatever the reason might be. And this graph really shows the improvement we've been able to achieve this year over last year through the month of April. I know Council understands the challenges that we face in operating in a city our size with our limited resources and the importance of getting everything that you can from your dollar. We've tried to take advantage of various technologies to help gather information to better manage our business, to act more accurately and more quickly diagnose bus problems, and to make purchasing transportation service easier for our patrons. We continue to experience fixed route ridership gains from last year, and that's significant because last year was a very good ridership year for us, even though the fuel prices had actually dropped last year. We are actually bucking the national trend right now. Nationally, ridership on public transportation is actually decreasing, so the fact that we've been going in the opposite direction here is even more satisfying to us.
Rick, what are you attributing that to?
On a national level, I think a large part of it is the economy and the fact that people are losing jobs. On the other hand here, I think our reliability is much better. We've just seen an increasing demand for our service. Do you have any idea of the type of uses that people are using for this increased ridership? Are people trying to get to work? Are they trying to get downtown? Are they trying to get to church? Yeah, and I will speak to that in a little bit because we have done customer surveys, so we generally know what our people are telling us relative to how they use it. And there is no question taking it to and from work is the largest use of our system. but you also get into those other things, whether it's going to school or job training opportunities, obviously going to health care and shopping and just those basic life functions. But we do know we've had multiple surveys now over the last several years, and consistently to and from work is the largest reason for using the bus.
Okay.
I know I've presented this information before to you, both in our transit workshop and also in previous budget presentations, but this information has been updated to the most recent Federal Transit Administration National Transit Database information that us, along with all transit agencies, have to report every year. But when compared with other cities in our region and other city capitals in our area, or state capitals, I'm sorry, in our area, we continue to rank lowest in the amount of public transit funding on a per capita basis. I mentioned previously that providing safe service is a high priority for our agency. We're working in partnership with the Public Works Department to take advantage of the city's focus on improving walkability through more and better sidewalks, and we're utilizing some federal funds to try to make safer connections between the sidewalk and our bus stops. We're also taking advantage of some new federal funding that was made available within the last couple of years to provide for safer street crossings at intersections near very busy bus stops. These crossing alarms not only present a visual message for people to help them safely cross the street, but also provide an audible message for those who have visual impairments. And this past year we completed the installation of cameras in all of our buses, which has contributed on two levels. One, it's helped us to reduce the number of passenger claims that we were experiencing, and also we're taking advantage of the recordings that come from those cameras to work with our drivers to improve their driving skills and or customer service skills. We continue to work on improving the quality of service for our customers. We've continued our practice of conducting formal transit rider surveys to find out what it is that we can do better to satisfy the needs of our patrons. We've revamped our website for both transit and parking so that the customers have better and more comprehensive information. And with the purchase of these 10 buses that I mentioned previously, we'll continue to expand our fleet of low-floor vehicles to make it easier for people to get on and off the bus, and it also helps us eliminate those very expensive and costly wheelchair lifts. Parking occupancy has continued to grow this year. I know, though, that we will see a significant drop here in the next couple of months as the Devon employees begin to transition into their new parking garage, but it is still our commitment that we are going to continue to focus on improving our parking experience for those who work and come down to the Central Business District. Our total proposed budget for this next fiscal year is just over $30 million. This includes all revenue, again, not just what is being funded by the city. This particular slide focuses only on the public transit component of our department because it is by far the largest segment. The sources of funding are basically the same as what's been presented in previous years, only the amounts really are different. This slide provides a closer look at our funding sources, comparing current year funding to our proposed budget for 2010-2011. The most significant difference is between the city funding and federal funding levels. You might recall last year the city accounted for nearly 50% of the funding for the transit operation, and the federal portion was about 32%. This year it's nearly equal, with the federal portion actually being just a little bit larger. This has come about because we have reallocated a portion of our American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds, or our stimulus monies, to operations. Now, typically we are not able to do that because in large urban areas you can only use federal money for capital items. However, when the stimulus grant was approved, as it relates to transit, there was a 10% allowance that you could make to put into operations. We received $10 million in the stimulus money, and so we reallocated $1 million of that, again, by law. The other thing that I've done this year is I did have conversations with the Federal Transit Administration. I have requested the ability to use a second $1 million to apply towards our ADA services. and we are still waiting for that approval, but I anticipate that approval here within the next couple of months. And so what we have done is we've taken $2 million of federal money and reallocate it to operations this year so as not to have to make further cuts in our service. The challenge that that's going to present is obviously next year, either COPA or the city are going to have to find $2 million, or we're going to have to make serious cuts next year, far more than what we're proposing to do this year. You know, there's been a lot of discussions on the federal level right now in Congress relative to how can they help transit properties, because across the board we're seeing about 85%, according to the American Public Transit Association, 85% of the transit systems across the country are doing one or all of the following. They're either cutting service, they're laying off employees, or they're increasing fares. And so with that, there's been a move in Congress on both houses to try to make allowances for transit systems to be able to use federal money for operations. Now, I've taken a look at some of those proposals. They could mean as much as $2 million to us. They could mean as little as $350,000 to us. The real challenge is, when would that happen if it does happen? I think, number one, the question is, because, again, the deficit discussions that are in Washington, whether any money is actually put forward to transit as a special appropriation remains to be seen. I think at best you're not going to see anything happen until after the elections in November. And part of the discussion has been that anything that happens to transit is going to come as a result of the new transportation bill. And if that happens, I wouldn't expect that to occur until at least next April or later, certainly in the springtime. So although there is discussion about money being available, there's nothing there that's going to happen, I think, real fast. It would certainly be a godsend to us if it does, but time will tell. This next slide, let me back up for just one. There was one other point I did want to make, and that is state funding. We talk about it every year. State funding, again, is such a small percentage of our budget, and in fact, next year state funding is even going to be a little bit less because of just across-the-board cuts that are occurring at the state agency level. This slide highlights some of the more significant changes in our proposed budget from this year's budget, but I don't want you to assume this is all the things. These are really most of the larger changes. The biggest change is the reduction in general fund subsidy, and I've already talked about that $2 million that we're reallocating from federal money. The difference between the $2 million and the $1.9 million that shows up there is the city actually is providing another $100,000 to transit because of anticipated higher fuel prices that we'll see next year. We also had a significant change in our parking debt service. This came as a result of the sale of our 2 city center parking garages that were done related to the Devon development, and the sale of our east garage to some private parties. We had also planned last year or this current year, we had planned to spend $1 million to do some garage renovations. Actually, because of the sale of the 2 garages, and we are in negotiations on the potential sale of a 3rd garage, we chose not to do those changes, and instead we're going to add another $750 million to that $1 million. And this coming year, we're going to not only make some improvements in our garages, but we're also going to buy new garage control equipment, new entry equipment that is terribly outdated and needs to be improved. The monies that comes from the parking side, parking is a self-sufficient operation. It pays its own way. So these are monies that we have in reserve in our account that we'll be using for these capital expenditures. We are proposing a fare increase for next year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We also have, unfortunately, a service reduction proposed for this coming year, and again, I'll get into those details in a little bit. And finally, through the upgrade of our bus fleet and also through improvements we've made in our maintenance procedures, we do anticipate seeing a significant reduction in our maintenance expense for this coming year.
I missed, why would the reduction come in the maintenance? Because of newer
well, 2 things. Really, we've been putting increased emphasis on our maintenance procedures out there. So between newer buses, between the fact that we've made significant facility improvements out there to improve the working environment through extensive training that we've been doing in our maintenance department, and then just some procedural changes, particularly paying attention to those preventative maintenance, regular preventative maintenance on our equipment. We've seen much better production coming out, both in reliability in terms of the service on the street and also in terms of cost reduction.
Rick, how do the projected fuel prices impact this budget for the coming year?
How will it?
Yes.
Based on the number that the budget office put together, because that's a collaborative number, we use the same one that you would see for all the other departments. We're anticipating an increase of about $100,000 in that account.
That's projecting then the price of gas
is going to go up. Yes, yes. And we've made allowances whenever, if we anticipate that we're going to have reductions in service or we're going to have efficiencies by bringing on new equipment, we make those allowances so that essentially what we do is we as a department come up with here's how many gallons we think we're going to use next year, and then the city takes that gallon times the whatever dollar amount is determined to be the reasonable amount. That's how we back into the fuel number.
Rick, what's the expected sale prices of the 3 garages you stated?
Well, the 2 garages that we sold this year sold for about $25 million in total. That allowed us to actually retire all the debt that we incurred when we built those 2 garages in 2003, 2004. What we have left now are 5 garages in our system. Our debt service went from something like $34 million down to where right now when we make our next payment, which will be, well, we just made it July, or we will be making it July 1st, our debt on our existing system will be about $10 million. And again, we are in negotiations on a 3rd garage, but hate to share numbers right now on that and what we're doing. Clearly, our board is very concerned about if we're selling garages. We want to make sure that we're still meeting our obligation to provide adequate parking for the downtown folks who come to visit or who work downtown. There's certainly an attractive feature if we're able to sell a garage and retire our existing debt on our system. It opens up possibilities for us. Do we need to build another garage? We're certainly going to work with the city in regards to that possibility if it's deemed to be necessary. And honestly, from an operational perspective, there's an issue. Right now in our bond indenture, it says that parking money can only be used for parking purposes. There was a time in the 80s before parking fell on hard times when parking actually helped subsidize the transit operation. So right now, we couldn't do that. Our bond indenture prohibits that. In the future, if we had no parking debt, that would be an option that would be available if we would choose to do so.
So have you identified any other locations as far as land for the possibility of parking in the event that?
We've had some conversations with some of the city staff that would be involved in something like that. We're not seriously pursuing anything at this point in time, but we are aware of possibilities that might be out there.
Rick, I'm not sure I understand the logic in selling a garage to reduce the debt at the same time you're looking to build another garage that you'll have to build with debt. I guess I don't understand how that makes sense.
Well, what we have, we've got interest. We actually, when we put an RFP on the street to see if anybody was interested in buying our garages, we got bites on every garage we put up for sale. Right. At this particular time, our trustees will evaluate it from the standpoint, is the garage that we're selling contributing to the system or a burden on the system? Obviously, if it's a burden on the system, it might be to our advantage to go ahead and sell it. Reducing our debt also gives us the flexibility of not our biggest payment every year is our debt service payment, and so if that pressure is taken off, it does allow us a little flexibility in terms of selling the garage because the cash flow from that garage may not be quite as important to us in that respect. Again, Do we build a new garage? At this point in time, that remains to be seen. Again, we're not in any serious discussions about building parking garages. There is an advantage to eliminating debt on our books to make us more appealing. There's no question that right now when we go to the bond market, we sell parking revenue bonds, but our bond issue is underwritten by the Water Trust. That's where the strength of our standing comes from. Although just as the city had their bond rating improved, COPA actually had their bond rating improved on the parking garages. That made us feel good. We are reducing our debt. We're reducing a debt that we have to the Water Trust. It is a self-sufficient operation now. For years it was a subsidy operation by the city. So we've made significant financial progress in the parking area in that regard.
I've always been a little bit troubled by the almost what I consider to be a schizophrenic thing when you have, on one hand, you're in the public transit business trying to talk to people into riding a bus, and on the other hand, you're in the parking business trying to talk to people into driving their cars downtown. It's always seemed to me there's a little bit difficult to hold those thoughts in my head at the same time. But I'm still not seeing what, I understand if you have lower debt, it's easier to borrow money, but if you're getting lower debt in order to borrow money, I guess I'm not understanding, unless you're trying to get out of the parking business, I don't understand really why you would sell parking garage.
Now, and if I said that we're trying to sell a parking garage to get out of debt to build
No, you didn't say that. No, you didn't say that. You just said that the result of having lower debt is, and I understand that. But if you're going back into the market and borrow more money, unless you're getting a very advantageous interest rate off of the fact that you have lower debt compared to the debt rate that you had, which I don't think is the case. I think you can go refinance at whatever the lowest rates there are now anyway, if that would be the case. I'm just not, I guess I'm just dense, but I don't understand how that is a positive. I don't know how disposing of a parking garage at a time when you're considering buying other parking garages is logical. It just doesn't make sense to me. Indulge me. Explain it to me one more time.
Okay. Number one, the question is how serious are we considering, and we're just aware that there might be demands. The other issue that's out there that you also have to keep in mind is the location of the parking garage. The fact of the matter is the Broadway Kerr is on the northeast part of the downtown core area. We're going to have, with the relocation of Devon, the Santa Fe garage is going to open up. We're going to open up about 900 spaces in that garage that are currently occupied. So that provides an opportunity for additional parking on the east side. If our demand is on the west side of town, the reality is folks in Oklahoma City, frankly, just don't like to walk very far. And they will not find our garage, even if we have a very competitive price on it, very appealing. They're going to park closer to where they work. So again, those are some of the thought processes that go into it. We're not seriously looking at building a garage tomorrow. So from that standpoint, the sale of this, potential sale of this other garage is moving forward, and it's going to be done if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, it won't happen.
Well, since there is this conflict in a sense, or maybe I'm the only one that sees the conflict, but there is a conflict between operating a parking facility and then trying to encourage people to park and operating a transit facility and trying to get them not to park. But given that, and given the fact that the Water Trust underwrites the debt of the parking authority, would it not be possible to issue future debt that would not be burdened by this inability to transfer parking revenues to transit?
I guess that's a question. I mean, that's something that would have to be negotiated at that point in time to see if the buyers of the bonds would be willing to do that. I just don't know. I mean, keeping in mind, because we have refinanced our bonds over time, and we've got a debt to the water system because they had to step up and make a payment in the 80s. So there is that history that's there that the parking system was not able to pay its own way. And so, the question is, are we strong enough now? No, I think we're much improved, but we're nowhere near probably being able to get the rate that we would want to get.
The thrust of this question is, though, is that if parking can operate at a profit based on this need for everybody to be able to park and not have to take more than 5 steps from where they get out of their car to go where they're going, I would like to see us capitalize on that and have put a surcharge on parking that would subsidize that, not just take whatever profits there are, but put $1 on every parking spot in downtown Oklahoma City and use that as a revenue stream to subsidize the transit. And with that prohibition there, you can't. That's not possible. That we could never even really seriously talk about that.
True.
It seems to me that when we're going to get into some other things here in transit here in a minute about things that we subsidize and what we ought to be subsidized, and this goes more to a philosophical view of it than it does a monetary view. But I mean, philosophically, I have a hard time with some of the things we subsidize in transit compared to some of the things we seem to have great pain in subsidizing compared to things we just blithely subsidize. And I'd like to see us get more realistic about that. And I mean, there are people here, I can look out here and see, there are people here that are here because their ability to utilize public transit is the only way they get around. I mean, it's the only way they go to work, it's the only way they go to church, it's the only way they go to school. And yet we're able to, we seem every year we have this almost like a birth pain of trying to determine how we're going to continue to subsidize that kind of transit. And we just blithely subsidize what I consider to be tourism transit just without even, we don't even want to talk about it. We just do it. But the money, that every dollar is a dollar. And if we could find a way to make parking helpful in this, and I think we could if we had that prohibition out of the bond indenture. And I think maybe now, I mean, I don't know that, especially given the times, I can't imagine an agency within the city structure that's more financially sound than the water system. And if that being your underwriter, it would seem to me this might be a good time to readdress that and try to utilize this, try to capitalize on this need to be able to not walk and ride, but literally just ride right to the door, and make some of those folks pay for that, the transit part. We don't have a way to subsidize transit. We don't have a regional-wide system. We don't even have a local system that does it. We rely on basically fares, subsidy, federal, state, and our own subsidy. But if we could get some other kind of revenue source, it seems to me we might stabilize that. I'm preaching, and you're the only member of the congregation, but I just think we need to start thinking a little bit more outside the box about how we do it. I'm always torn by this. When this discussion comes up every year, I'm always troubled by this because we tend, in my view, again, I won't say it more than one more time. We tend to subsidize things that are necessary for people with great pain and subsidize things that are frills with almost just a wave of the hand. And that I find that very troubling. I'm through. I said I wouldn't say it again.
Let me just make one comment, and that is because you've mentioned before about this dichotomy of parking and transit. We recognize that a lot of folks here in Oklahoma City are not willing to give up their cars or their trucks, and so there's always going to be a parking market out there. It's difficult to move people out of their vehicles if they have that because our transit system, which is so limited, doesn't provide very many options to folks. And if you have a choice, and your choice is either taking 45 minutes to get to your destination or 15 minutes because you have the ability to drive, you're going to drive. And so we recognize we've got two distinct markets, and that's how we attack the problem.
I just don't think we do the parking market, we do it as well as we ought to. Every time, now that you can't get here from South Oklahoma City to downtown, every time I come, I have to come winding through all that area that's south of the present footprint of I-40. And I see vacant lots with signs, $10 parking. I mean, if people have got $10 to pay to park, they can pay another $1 and subsidize some of these things that are necessary for people to exist. I mean, I'm struck by that every time I come to town. I see those signs. And that's the free enterprise making money off of it. But if they're so willing to do that, and when you consider all the problems there are with pollution, all the things that are created by so many cars being driven, it seems to me that we've got to start thinking outside the box and find another way to subsidize the transit piece of it. Because it's going to be there. We're not, or at least I'm not, and there are several of us here I believe that agree, are not going to turn our back on folks that have to rely on public transit to make it, especially at a time when we're subsidizing what I consider tourist-type things. If we weren't going to subsidize any of it, it'd be different. But since we subsidize so heavily some of these tourist activities, I just have a hard time with some of the things that we talk about how tight it is on the transit side. I didn't repeat anything I said first, did I? Okay.
Okay, let us move on here. In order to meet our budget targets for this year, we had to make some significant reductions. And I think it's important to understand how we arrived at our recommendations, because we know this is a very difficult and a regrettable step that we have to make. In just the last 4 years, we have moved from putting 48 buses on the street during our busiest time of day to 42 buses on the street during our busiest time of day. So over these last several years, we've actually been whittling away at our service. And we do that by first eliminating trips and then ultimately eliminating buses where we have multiple buses on a route. Anytime you start taking buses off the street in our marketplace, you start impacting people's lives. We know, and I mentioned earlier from our passenger surveys, that the majority of our riders are dependent upon the bus system for their sole source of transportation, and most of them are taking it to work. And others, I mentioned the other locations that they go, whether it's education or job training opportunities, again, healthcare, shopping, your basic life functions, they're dependent on our system to be able to accomplish those. As we considered what changes to recommend, we kept in mind the council directive, and that was to look at deleting programs, not just take partials of service or pieces of a system, maybe another way to say that. We looked at all of our routes to determine that those that produce the lowest ridership, and those are what we kind of focused on, and we did add on, again, a ridership per bus service hour basis. We know that cutting service on low ridership routes does not make it any less difficult for the people who use those routes. The only thing it does is it just impacts fewer people. We held 3 public meetings to talk about proposed changes, not only in the routes, but also to talk about the fare increases. You can look behind me and see that there's many here today that can tell a much better story than I, but I do want to relate to you some of the comments that we heard in our public meeting sessions. Number one, these meetings were extremely well attended. Sometimes in the past you have a public meeting and you get less than a handful of people there. This time we had anywhere from 25 to 45 people at each of our meetings. Many are concerned that they're going to lose their job if they lose the ability to have transportation to get them to their place of employment. Some were critical of the already limited service that we have, and particularly when we started talking about taking late night and Sunday service off the street. There are a lot of folks who don't work the typical 8 to 5 shift, and unfortunately our bus system is basically designed for that type of a worker. They wanted to know if increasing fares more than we suggested would help preserve the service. And you might recall in our workshop we talked about fare box recovery, how much money comes through our fare system and what does that mean to our operating budget. And it's such a small portion. I mean, you're talking anywhere from 10 to 12% of our budget is actually covered by the fares that come through the fare box. And then we have wheelchair users who talked about the fact that our local cab companies don't provide opportunity. If you're bound to a wheelchair, you can't use the cabs in this community. The routes that we proposed for elimination are highlighted. Metrolink, which is a contracted service that we operate through Airport Express. It operates from 7 p.m. in the evening to midnight, Monday through Friday, and then from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Sundays. It has a very specific service area, which roughly is 63rd Street on the north, 89th on the south, Bryant on the east side, and MacArthur on the west side, except we've got a little bump out there at Reno and Rockwell. We've also proposed dropping those trips that we added to Routes 8 and Route 40 this year. This was a pilot program that we initiated. It really came about as a result of our transit workshop, when we talked about the fact that if you increase frequency, you will see increased ridership. There is, I believe, in your packet, a city manager report this week that highlights the progress that has been made on both of those routes over the last 9 months since we've initiated that service, and we have seen significant ridership increases, particularly in Route 40, which has just really grown. And in fact, I had the opportunity to have staff calculate how did May come out, and in May our ridership on Route 40 was up 35%. On Route 8 it was up about 14%. And this compares to just 6% ridership increase that we saw in the month of May across the entire system. We have also proposed discontinuing Route 51, which is also known as the Orange Line Trolley. This is a service that connects the I-40 Meridian area to downtown through Stockyard City. This was a service that was begun back in '99 as part of the first MAPS program. So adding those up, the total savings through this proposed service reduction is about $785,000. This is a net number to the city in that we have already made allowances for federal recovery money that we already apply to each of these different routes.
Rick, on the MetroLink, what is the ridership of this service, primarily on Sundays? I mean, do we have the numbers that show what the ridership is on the MetroLink?
We do. We have it. You know, there are basically 5 zones in that service area. I know that generally speaking, and this is going to be an average number now on a daily basis, it's about 125 people. It does vary, but that's kind of a collective average for the system.
You know, my concern about this is that there is a certain population in this city that is very much in need of service. And as Councilman stated and you stated, there's an audience full of these citizens that have a very special need in reference to transportation. The issue of the MetroLink, I find, has even a more unique service because on Sundays, that is a religious day that a lot of these individuals depend upon this type of service to get to their place of worship. And you know, I know employment is an important component in everybody's life, but when we have a bus service that operates 5 days, 6 days a week, and then we have a service that was designed, I assume, because it's late night for those individuals who may have employment that's, you know, after the bus service runs. But then Sunday, obviously, when this was established, Sunday had a very particular purpose for having the service on Sunday. And I just find this is going to be a very disheartening, and I just have a problem with just, you know, eliminating this total service. I could see if the late night ridership is not that strong. But the one day that these individuals have to try to get to a place of worship and not have the service provided to them, I'm just having a problem with that. And I've gotten several calls. I've gotten a letter from the operators of the MetroLink. And, you know, the one thing that I can say is that I have never received, since I've been on the council in the 2 years I've been here, I've never received a call from any citizen complaining about the Metrolink. And I just wonder if we just not taking into consideration some of the real human issues that we are chopping at to provide people a quality of life and respect as it relates to their activities doing, on Sunday. And that's why I was wanting to know, what is the ridership?
Again, I could give you the average number, which is 125. I can get you the specifics if we just pull out the Sunday ridership and let you know what that is. It's going to be a number that's somewhat close to that.
Rick, will you finish?
Sure.
Rick, could you, with the three service changes, Metrolink 80 and routes 8, 40, and Route 51, they collectively represent service reduction of $785,000. Could you break out the three costs of these, the total of $785,000, please?
Yeah, the Metrolink service cost projected for next year, and again, these are net numbers after we've taken out recovery that we would get through federal monies, is, I'm going to round these numbers, $478,000. $478,000. The Route 8 cost is $127,000. The Route 40 cost is $60,529. And the Route 51 cost is $120,000.
Okay. Mr. Kelly addressed a concern specifically with regards to Metrolink and the loss of Sunday services for worship services, which I agree with. I want to speak, though, to the general concern of public transit that we're hearing at these public meetings, whether that be Sunday, late night, or extended service hours of our buses are more frequent, and that is the loss of their jobs. When we agreed here a year ago at Council to attempt to respond to this age-old concern about if we extend the hours of our present bus system, if we extend the frequency, increase the frequency of our existing bus services, people will use the buses. The experiments that we tried with Route 8 and Route 40, and I'm happy to note these aren't any one or two wards. I think they cross 5 or 6 different wards in the city going north and south. But the increase in ridership in both these routes, and this is just over the first 9 months, first 3 quarters, 16% on one, 25% on the other, increase in ridership, not only bucking the national trend, but at a time in the last 12 months when the price of gasoline has been going down, the ridership on these 2 routes have been going up, and not just going up dramatically. And I think that says something extremely critical about the bus service that we are trying to provide. We've got a basic system that is very limited. We've got a basic system that if we build into it like we did this current year on 2 routes, the results of this just fly in the face of every national trend and price of gas, and says if we're concerned about getting people, particularly those dependent riders, to work, and if job-related is that important to the growth of this city, which we talk about week after week, and particularly with these riders, at I guess it's $127,000 plus the 60, $187,000 to continue that program, and to look at the continuation of Metrolink. I see in the letter from the operator, the Metrolink operator, Rick, even more than 50% ridership, that over 80% of the service of the hours 7 p.m. to midnight and Sunday service are for job sites, going to and from job sites, and then emphasis on church on Sunday. It just behooves us to say that we have any kind of bus service in this city, to go backwards at this point in time, even with the economy as it is, with the dollars it would take to keep us moving at the same rate, just to me flies in the face of everything that we're trying to do here. And I'm happy to see that again, the job-related concerns that people are expressing, both with these extended routes and the extended hours in Metrolink, particularly the week extension from 7 p.m. to midnight, really begins to address the job needs of this city for that element of our community, the dependent riders, but also that basic entry-level and service jobs that I think most of these riders are going to and from. Just the underpinning of this economy in this city. We have got to find a way to move forward on these.
Well, I have to say that if my memory serves correctly, I was a little reluctant on the Route 40 going into South Oklahoma City, whether or not it would be useful, and surprisingly, it increased. I think the issue, and obviously it's a touchy issue. We've seen, this chamber full, which is not a common occurrence, but we've asked not only this department, but all the other departments to make very incredibly difficult decisions. And we can find an excuse or a reason or an example of every single program that's been cut as to why we shouldn't cut it. And my concern is that we're arguing here, and I don't disagree with Sam or Skip, either one, on the need and how good it is. I'm not disagreeing with that. But we have to talk about ability. That's the issue that I see that we're facing. It's not whether we want to provide these people the service, it's if we have the ability to. And as much as we'd like to have the ability to, we've asked this gentleman to do a very incredibly difficult job and pick something to cut, and he's done that. And now we're saying, oh, well, we don't like what you've cut, go back and cut something else. Well, there'll be something else. There'll be another reason not to cut. And so I think we have to look at what we would like to do and what we have the ability to do. And I think what we're looking at right now is what we have the ability to do, and hopefully in the future that changes. But right now, we have to keep our emotions in check and look at the numbers and see what we have the ability to do.
I want to just, I think we've got the ability, Brian. I want to speak first to the experiment that we tried with routes 8 and 40, and what the results that we've seen from that. With the month that we've had, the past month in sales tax, and the manager and everyone up here said that is not a trend, to be sure. But we have seen in the past month a change, a sudden change in the sales tax revenue. We have an ability at this level to move forward and address that need. If we can't go to the extent of addressing the need, the job-related need for the extended, the flexible service through Metrolink, I think we certainly can give instructions to our transit department that with the priority on the new federal funds, the additional federal funds, that those federal funds be allocated to Metrolink when the time comes, and I understand that may be fall before we know that. But we can also instruct the transit director to allocate those funds if we don't have the wherewithal to expand our current budget to meet the Metrolink needs as well. I think we've got the ability. It's just the will.
I had a quick question, Rick, related to Metrolink, if we could. And you and I have worked together on a number of these programs, and looked at the ability to maybe break out a particular, I'm sorry, I'm on, but I'm not on. We have talked with regard to each of these eliminations about the possibility of carving out service that is, very much needed by our citizens. Did you look at, or is there a possibility that we could look at the Sunday service on MetroLink exclusively and see what the cost of that would be? If I understand, this is contracted service, that we could have the ability perhaps to pick and choose menu options.
Certainly that's available. I have not done that, so I could not tell you what Sunday service cost as a component of the bigger piece.
I'm just suggesting that maybe that be an option as we're looking at how to pare some of these things down. I've had a particular interest, along with Larry, on Route 51, which is service that's been providing folks the opportunity to get from the Meridian Corridor, the Hotel Corridor, and Stockyards to downtown, which has been pointed out was one component of our original MAPS program. And in kind of trying to take that same approach, we have talked to the hoteliers and we've talked to the folks in Stockyards who really believe the most necessary part of that service would be perhaps just Friday and Saturday nights. And it's my understanding that the cost of providing that route might be as little as $60,000 rather than $120,000. I'd like to perhaps consider, as we look at some of these things, paring it down to that level of service just 2 days a week and see how that might work into a slightly realigned budget orientation. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Rick, first of all, I want to clear the air that we do respect the position that you have and what you have to do. And as always, recommendations are recommendations. And until this council makes the final vote on it, that is what the policy will be. So I think the dialogue is very helpful. I think this audience understands that the different views and the comments that's made it's helpful for them to weigh and evaluate, the decision-making that has to be ultimately made by the council. And so I want to thank you and respect you for your position. My concern has always been that in some respect that it seems like that sometimes if there is a project that needs to be supported by the general population, there is ways and resources that are hunted and found in order to support that. Now, whether or not we have to get to a point of a designated funding source or whatever it needs to be, I am passionate as it relates to the handicapped population in this city, as far as them having a quality of life and being able to move and enjoy the rest of the projects and places to go in this city as everybody else is. And that's why my concern is about this issue of Sunday, the MetroLink. The MetroLink do have a very unique service that they provide to a population in this city. They are able to take people to off-route locations, pick them up, and when you talk about these individuals who are on very, very limited income for medication, back and forth to their doctor's office, for purposes of anything else that they have to tend to as it relates to survival for one day to the next, I just find that this is something that, we need to have a different eye as far as looking at and providing those services for these individuals, and it gets to the point where it's almost, they pay taxes just like everybody else. Many of them didn't ask to be, none of them asked to be in the situation that they're in, but they still pay taxes. And I just think that when we're talking about transportation, You know, and I would jump out of the box, because when we started talking about this whole issue of transportation, from regional transportation to the light rail transportation and all of that, I don't think we were talking about a limited population or population of individuals who have limited physical challenges. We were talking about people who could just jump up in the air and bounce any place they want to bounce to, go wherever they want to go to, whenever they want to go. We were talking about making things accessible for them, the convenience for them. And I think that through the years of supporting projects in this city, that this whole issue of transportation needs to have a very, very different view from this point on. And what happens, you know, there was a bill that came out of the Senate Banking Committee, and it's so sensitive that they have even recommended $2 billion for the transportation agencies to have flexibility in reference to operating their departments. Now, the funding is not there, I'm sure, right now. But what would happen if the funding is there? Would your department be able to tap into those funds in order to provide additional services?
Yes, that $2 billion bill that you're talking about is the one that was proposed by Senator Dodd. Senator Dodd is chairman of the Banking Committee, and in the Senate, the Banking Committee is the Committee of Oversight for Transit. So, and if you recall, I talked earlier about the bills, and here's what would happen. We took the $2 billion Dodd proposal, and we backed into that, saying if they used the typical formula distribution process that the feds normally used, and that's what we're led to believe would be used for this particular bill, that would be about $2.4 million coming to Oklahoma City that would be allowed to be used for operations. So that is the high side number of all the proposals that are out there right now.
And in your position, being, you know, a person who's had to go to D.C. and lobby, what is your feelings about the passage and the appropriations of those funds?
I think, you know, certainly what we're hearing, there's no question that regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, that there's a recognition of the impact that the economy has had on public transportation and the cuts. And I mentioned the, you know, nearly 85% of systems across the country are doing one of three negative things and or more. The challenge that's going to be there is, number one, the Dodd bill has been argued that it's a deficit bill, that there is no proposed funding source for that. That's not my argument. That's just what's back there. So I think you've got that challenge that's in front of it. The other one is perhaps more of a timing issue, and that comes from, are they going to do this as an independent funding action, or are they going to just try to roll it into a transportation bill? You know, the transportation bill is expired. That's not atypical for Washington. Generally, it takes them 2 years after it's expired to get a new transportation bill in place. That's been the history over the last two bills that have been done, maybe even longer than that. So again, I think given that this is an election year, we would anticipate that nothing's going to happen until after November, and more likely if it gets tied up in a bill, it's going to be next April or later. So, you know, that $2 million, if it were to come our way, would help us next year. But essentially what it would do, we'd almost have to look at it in light of saying this year we put $2 million into the system that it needs to be replaced next year. So if we were to get $2 million, it would almost be a wash, and we'd buy ourselves another year, but we wouldn't be necessarily buying ourselves the ability to put more service back on the street. So kind of a long-winded answer, but that's how I see it playing out. And again, I don't profess to be an expert, but in terms of talking to compatriots and our association and trying to understand what's the feeling back in Washington, that's certainly what we're hearing.
Thank you.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One, thank you, Rick, for doing what we said to do. We did say from up here we would like programs cut, if I recall, and that's what you've done. You've identified some. We may be our own worst enemy. Is it possible, without getting any one of these areas, is it possible to provide less than a total cut for any of these three? In other words, have some type of okay, we're going to reduce some of the service on the Metrolink, or we're going to reduce some of the Orange Line trolley service, piecemeal some savings. Is that possible?
It's certainly possible.
That's okay. Just hold there. Okay, that's all I wanted to know. I don't want you to commit to anything. I just wanted to know if that is possible. All right? The second thing is I hear mentioned from Councilman Bowman that maybe we have some extra monies that we could appropriate, and I think that was kind of Mr. Couch may have said that. Hadn't said that to me directly. What I'd like to ask Jim is this question here. Several years ago, during the budget process, and I'm looking around, I think maybe Gary was the only one who was here, then Gary and I and Mick and Pat, we were given a list as council members of potential additional projects, and there was several millions of dollars that was available, and we voted as a council to provide additional funds over the budget recommendations that each department head had come in, and we took some money and put it here, we put some money here and some money here. Do you remember that process? I do. Okay. Is it possible, do you feel that there is some potential for some extra money? Because if there's no extra money, we don't have the ability to pay. Is there some extra money out there that you feel, X dollars, that could be put on a list and let us look at that and say how we would like this extra money funded for this, that, or the other?
When we put the budget together, there was no extra money. When the budget was rolled out, we had a lot of cuts. The two budget options, option two, we had the elimination of 51 public safety positions, fish hatcheries are being closed, swimming pools being closed, rec centers being cut down, mowing schedules being adjusted. A lot of negative things throughout the city that were out there, and there was no additional revenues to be put in place. On top of that, we had about $10 million, $9 million, I guess, of one-time monies being put in, either $10 million from the fund balance or from the MAP 3 use tax that was put in. That was the scenario when we laid out the budget. Subsequent to that, we received the May sales tax check. The May sales tax check is pretty good. And so if we were to project that forward and to use that into next year's revenue projections, there would be some additional dollars. Craig's going to go over that in a little bit specifically on the revenue picture. Subsequent to that, as of last Friday, we received a June sales tax check. June sales tax check is not so good. It's better than last year by 2.88%, rounded back to 3%, if you will. Last year it was down 7%. So although it's 3% better than last year, it's still 4% less than it was 2 years ago. So that we had very meager results coming in June. That being said, there are a few $100,000 of additional revenue that could be put in based upon the May sales tax projections and when we accumulate that and go forward with that. But it's not a lot of money that could be out there, but there are a few $100,000 that could be added to the revenue source. We haven't changed any expenditure size at this point in time, and we haven't really, we had new fees and new things, but those were already all plugged in. So yes, there are a few $100,000 of additional revenue that could either be left in reserve or be used for some selected programs.
So that would be a decision that we would have to make, whether we wanted to use that money, that few $100,000, or whether we wanted to keep it in reserve.
Yes, sir.
And that would be a policy decision that this council could make.
Yes, sir.
That's all. Thank you, sir.
But that, just to follow up, Jim, that still does not, that's still using the one-time money. Would you have that money available?
Absolutely, sir. All I'm talking about is a change in conditions since we rolled out the budget in early May. We've got two more sales tax checks. The May check was a little bit better. The June check, not so good. But if you take that May check and you put that into our projections of our modeling and project forward, there's a few $100,000 additional money in potential revenue on the sales tax.
And my whole question was not intent to advocate one or the other, just to frame the debate to see, is that a possibility? And you said it is a possibility, and it would have some risk, as Gary's already talked about.
It seems to me, though, that the budget process is always one of hard decisions. I mean, even in good times, you make those allocation decisions without feeling much pain, but they're still not easy decisions to make when you're trying to allocate what monies are available to, because there are always more programs that are out there than there is money to cover. So in that regard, there's really not much difference between making budget decisions in a good time and a bad time. They're always difficult to do. For me, I want to make those decisions based on a view that says that we make the kind of cuts that are least impactful on people that can least afford to be impacted. And I think and that's why last year, when we weren't in this situation, we decided to go ahead and enhance 8 and 40. Now that we, I thought I was so close to hearing Councilman Walters say that he was wrong, but he wasn't quite able to do that. I just waited for him to say that, but he didn't do that. But be that as it may, we were right about enhancing 8 and 40. It worked. I think, and it worked to the advantage of a lot of people that without us being brave enough to take that step in a situation like we had last year, they would not have had the benefit of it. And I think we're just in the same situation now. It's just a little bit harder to do it. But that doesn't mean we can't do it, doesn't mean it's impossible to do it, because in a budget the size of Oklahoma City's, even with the June not being quite so good as May was, we're still, there's that in a budget this size, there's a range there of a few $1,000s, no matter what you do, because all those numbers are projections. But when you're talking about something that did as much good as what we did last year on 8 and 40, and what has the potential on the Metrolink, I just think we have an obligation as stewards of the money that we're obligated to take care of, to do it in the best way possible. And I just think that I think we sent by the conversation we've had today, I think we've sent a pretty good message to those that are going to be constructing the budget that 8 and 40 are very important to us, that perhaps a reduction in the orange line would work, and we want whatever monies or extra money is available that comes to it as soon as possible to do Metrolink, and maybe perhaps look at keeping Metrolink open on Sunday. I personally have some difficulty in looking at it from just Sunday, since 80% of the money 80% of the ridership in Metrolink is not church-related, not medically related, it's work-related. And so when we talk about what we're subsidizing, we ought to be, it seems to me, subsidizing those kind of things that let people make a religion, make a living. Did I sing that the first time? Yes. I did. Okay, I'm sorry.
Rick, go ahead, please. Rick,
more bad news. We are proposing a fare increase. It's been since 2003 that we've actually increased fares on our system. And in part, that was a decision because as I mentioned earlier, we've been cutting service over the last several years, and we really tried to avoid cutting service and increasing fares at the same time. Unfortunately, this year, the requirement was such that we felt we didn't have any choice. Had we not increased fares, we would have ended up having to cut our service even further than we have. You know, we make the phone calls to our surrounding cities, see how we compare. Our fare was lower than many, and so from that standpoint, we have to make that recommendation. Regret that we do in a period when we're also proposing cuts, but again, it was the lesser of two evils, and we didn't want to cut service any further than we absolutely had to. We are proposing 2 new passes to be added to our service. These came as a result of some of our citizen surveys. People indicated that they had a preference for a 1-day and a 7-day pass. Previously, we had 30-day passes, and they wanted something of shorter duration. We called around and talked to our neighboring communities or agencies and said, you know, do you have these types of passes? If so, how did you structure them? What did you charge for them? We are proposing the discontinuance of free transfers. That's something that historically we have done. And we did receive comments in our public meetings relative to these passes. There were those who talked about a fare increase relative to being on fixed income, and that raising the fares is going to make it even more difficult for them when their income is not going up. We also talked about the fact that it could be a significant increase in cost for somebody making a trip if right now they get on the bus and they use one transfer to get to their final destination, that because it was free and now that we would be charging, it would cost more to do that. That assumes that they're not regular riders and that they aren't buying a one-day pass type of a situation. So there were negatives that came back relative to both of these proposals, and I wanted to share some of those comments that we did here relative to that. This coming fiscal year, we propose to make some significant gains in technology. I talked a little bit about how we've been trying to capitalize on tech. Go ahead.
Rick, I'm sorry, but before we move on, a couple of questions. The cost of the one day and cost of the 7 day?
The cost of the 1 day was $4. The cost of the 7 day was $15.
And how elastic or inelastic is the increase in the fare? Meaning going from $125 to $150 and $175 and $2 and so on.
Yeah,
how does that affect the ridership?
Generally, and this is kind of a transit rule of thumb here. So any time you increase fares 10%, you could anticipate up to a 7% decrease in ridership. Now, again, it's been a long time since we've done it. In 2003, we definitely saw a dip in ridership after we did the fare increase in 2003, but then we saw that those ridership gains came back to us. Generally, it might take a year, but they come back. And I think that's significant because you have to look at who is your market. And in our particular market, our riders generally are transit-dependent riders, and so it's not like they have a lot of other options.
Okay. Thanks.
Do not say, though, at the public meeting, or at least one of the public meetings, there were comments from the citizens that attended suggested an increase in fares to help.
Yeah, the question was, if we raised fares even more than we had proposed, would that generate enough money to avoid service cuts? And I think that speaks back to my point that what comes through the fare box is just such a small percentage of the overall operating budget. But that question was asked. I'm not going to say it was asked by the majority of people there, but it was certainly asked.
Rick, how much of the fare box is really part of your overall collected budget revenue?
Right now, it's going to run, well, I think based on next year's budget of $21 million in change in transit, we're showing about $2.2 million is actually coming through the fare box, so it's a little over 10%, maybe 11%. We do encourage the use of passes. Passes actually can be bought at a discount as opposed to just paying the regular daily fare. So in some ways, it's advantageous to us if people just got on the bus and paid cash every time. But the reality is it's cheaper for them to use the pass. At the same time, it also helps us operationally because we're able to get people on and off faster.
How are the passes communicated as far as the information in reference to the whole fare policy? I mean, how does information get to the average population of people who are dependent upon the transit system?
Several different ways. Number one, you'll see it on our website if you go to the website. If you're a regular rider, you're going to either see the notices on the buses, you're going to see the information at our transit center. Because we now have electronic fare boxes as opposed to what we had for many years where you had to drop your coins and dollar bills in the slot, you can actually buy passes on the bus, so that becomes a mobile ticket selling activity. The word travels fast. If you're a regular bus operator, you know those things. But we put it out there in many different forms to try to make people aware that these are the options that are available. Our media, that marketing will put, if we do something specific relative to fare, we may do it that way and put out a special piece. Our schedule brochures could have information relative to the costs or the types of passes that are made available. So we have lots of options that we put out in terms to share the information. But word of mouth is excellent. I mean, if you're a regular bus rider, you know these things and you pass it on.
So there's no other outlets as far as venues that a person could purchase a Oklahoma City bus pass?
As
like
opposed
a kiosk at a
Yeah,
mall
now, as opposed
or
to,
grocery store?
you've traveled to a lot of large cities, and they may have stores that actually sell those. We've tried doing that. Generally speaking, our volume of ridership, as opposed to, if you go to New York City in the Metro card, they beg to sell the Metro card in New York City because it brings people into the store. We don't have that kind of ridership volume to do that. So we have contracted with some stores. Otwell's in your ward was one that was a long-term seller of passes for us. We would typically have to offer some type of discount for them to get involved in selling passes for us, and we did offer those discounts to them as a ticket outlet. But we have not been real successful in generating enthusiasm for that. I mean, we've even approached the big boys, like the 7-Elevens, to see if they would do that. It's just, from their perspective, not a business decision that they want to do.
Interesting, you refer to 7-Elevens as the big boys. The big boys. But back to that, was the program successful at Otwell's?
It was. We still use Buy for Less as an outlet. They don't sell large volumes, but again, if we can make it more convenient for people to do it, we would do it. You know, we are very open. It comes down to a dollars and cents thing. A, do they want to do it? Some just simply don't. Some are willing to do it, but they want to get a significant repayment from us to perform that service for us.
Well, it seems like to me that there's a lot of opportunities to increase that as far as the fare passes, if a person is really looking at the advantages of using a pass as opposed to a daily fare. But the website, to me, I'm just not that happy with what's on the website. Sometimes it's challenges that people have to even get to the website, and everybody don't have a computer. And, you know, I just think that that's always, to me, it's never the best way to advertise something that you're trying to showcase. It's just because you put it on the website. And
we're sensitive to that. We understand that there are folks out there who don't have access or choose not to do it. But when the question was asked, what are the avenues, those are some of the, and we do use it for that. And there are some that take advantage of learning information through the website. But that's why we really try to reach out and do other things. And again, if you're going to impact the bus rider, the best way is to put it at the transit center and to put it on the buses, because that's where they are every day.
A very quick question there follows on this discussion of the passes. Do you have an idea of how many of your riders use passes compared to paying regularly? I mean, this audience, do most of you use passes? Okay, I mean, I think that's really indicative of a great program. Are you going to continue to offer 30-day pass as well?
Yes,
okay.
We're not discontinuing.
We haven't
that.
Discontinued that. We're just, okay. I think that's just a great way to do it, and a little bit like the parking add-on. You know, if our transfers are mostly used by folks that aren't regular users and they have to pay that fare twice, you know, that's a little bit of a premium for people coming to visit our city compared to people going to work every day. So, thank you, Rick.
You're welcome. Okay. I started off talking about technology. This summer we plan to introduce a trip planning module on our website so that if an individual wants to pick a destination and a point of origin, they can go ahead and plan the trip themselves and not have to be dependent upon calling our customer service area to help them plan that trip. We also anticipate expanding automated vehicle location to all the buses in our system. Currently, our trolleys have that capability, but what we're looking at doing is putting on all of our buses to help in two ways. Number one, it helps management to be able to manage and be aware of what's going on in our system. At the same time, it also provides real-time information for our passengers. So if they want to know when is that next bus going to arrive, that information will be out there for them. Again, we anticipate having that available on the website. If you've got a little PDA, if you're at the transit center, it'll be much like if you go to the airport and you look to say, when's that next bus coming, we'll have that information there, both inside and also outside around the perimeter of our facility. Right now, we have little totems by all of our outside stop locations, and there's a little black screen down there. If you ever drive by and see it or stop at the transit center, that's when we built that transit center in 2004. We built it with the anticipation that someday, if we could ever pull together enough money, we would be able to do this. And so those little screens will become little remote terminals where people will be able to know when that next bus is going to be showing up at that location.
Will it be voice activated?
Don't know. If the technology's there, we're certainly going to want to do it. Now, several years ago, it was almost too expensive for us to afford. Now that's gotten to be cheaper technology, and at the same time, we see more bells and whistles that are available in that kind of a deal. So we want to take advantage of the most current technology possible. And so I don't absolutely know if that's available, but if it is, we will certainly be doing it. Besides the AVL portion of it, and in terms of business management and real-time information for our riders, the other thing it's going to also allow us to do is provide automated stop announcements, so that if you're on a bus and you have a visual impairment and you may not be able to see what that next stop is that the bus is coming up to, it'll be able to, using the AVL technology, to be able to announce we are now approaching the intersection of, to help you understand this may be your stop and where you need to get off. In September, it was 2008, when we had our transit workshop. We plan on doing another one coming up on 2 weeks from today, June the 22nd. We'll be meeting at the MetroTech Spring Lake campus to talk about what's going on in transit. I am going to have a couple of transit CEOs. We're actually going to be trying a video conferencing technology, so we keep our fingers crossed it all works well. But we're actually, these are folks who have very successful rubber tire systems. One of them actually does have rail as part of their system as well. But we wanted them to talk about what worked in their communities. How were they able to develop their rubber tire bus system? You know, we'll hear some goods and we may hear some stories of things that didn't work well, but we think that we could glean from their experiences and find those things that may be applicable here as we start trying to do some longer-term planning and say, you know, at least lay out a plan and here's some steps that possibly might work for us in this marketplace. So, again, coming up in 2 weeks, we'll be doing that. Before concluding, I just want to touch very quickly on to mention some public transit planning activities that are going on that will continue into this next fiscal year. I also want to recognize that the participation by council that's taking place in every one of these activities. I'll go into a lot more detail about each of these as part of the workshop environment. But I do want to recognize that right now we've had the regional transit dialogue that's been going on for quite some time. The mayor serves as chairman of that steering committee. Councilwoman Salyer was on the governance subcommittee, which is one of the subcommittees that was formed to provide information ultimately to the steering committee. On the multimodal hub study, Councilman Bowman is sitting on the advisory committee for that. We are at right now, we will be interviewing on Wednesday the potential consultants for that program. You, because the city is helping fund that project, will be bringing that back to you for approval once we make that final determination and, as to who that sub-consultant will be. And we also had our first steering committee in the last couple of weeks for the alternatives analysis. Again, the mayor is serving as chairman of that steering committee, and Councilwoman Salyer is also a committee member on the AA study. So, in conclusion, next year's proposed budget includes a reduced level of service for bus service, a reduced level of service for the river, and we will continue our efforts to try to improve our parking operations for those who park in our parking system. So, with that, I'll try to answer any other questions that you might have.
Yes, I do. The study that you just mentioned as far as a consultant, in light of the budget concerns and the cost of the paying for a consultant, is that coming out of your budget?
Now, when we get into these types of things, there are planning monies. I talk about the fact that we can use federal funds on a very limited basis, mostly capital. There is some small operational element like ADA services. We also have a component piece of those federal funds that's called planning activity. And so we actually use some of those monies to reimburse our planning salaries. We also have planning monies that we will use towards those studies. So in the case of the hub study, it's actually a partnership with not only the city but with COTPA, and also ACOG is contributing. So whenever we talk about the majority of these studies, we're talking about at least 80% of it being funded out of federal funds. So it's not taking from operations.
Did you say ADA?
Yes, I said ADA as far as how we can use some federal money for operations. But I said 80% is what on the planning study comes out of federal funding. And that's funding that would not otherwise go to operations.
Well, let me ask you just one question. In reference to ADA, the MetroLink program, is it possible that that could come up under a funding source from federal funds for ADA?
The issue there is federal money, our federal formula funds have some restrictions. One of those restrictions is you cannot take any more than 10% of your federal formula funds and apply it towards ADA operations. What does that mean? Normally we'll get about $7 million a year in federal funds. So the cap on ADA services then would be 10% or $700,000. We'll spend over $3 million a year on ADA services, even more than that. So we never have enough money through the federal that we can appropriate towards ADA services. And that's why when I mentioned earlier how I had talked to the FTA about getting an allowance to not only take the first $1 million of stimulus funds, but also another $1 million of stimulus funds and reapply it to operations. My argument is that we would apply that towards ADA services. So, that gives us that extra $1 million, but add that to $700,000 and still doesn't get to $3 million. So there's always that shortfall, but at least we are. So from a MetroLink standpoint, to go back and answer your question more directly, no, we couldn't just use ADA funds to help fund it because we don't have enough funds to go around as it is.
Well, what is the exact cost of the MetroLink services?
Was $78,000 was the net cost to the city. The actual cost of the service is just under $800,000. And we apply about $300,000 of federal money to that. The way we do that is through something called capital cost of contracting. The feds have some really peculiar ways that they identify capital money that can be used by transit systems like us. And so one of those caveats is called capital cost of contracting. Now, it's a very specific formula in terms of how you recover the cost for Airport Express's service that they provide. So the net effect is about $300,000 of federal money goes to underwrite the cost of that service, which means the balance, which is the $478,000, is what the city picks up in subsidy to keep it on the street.
So there are some other alternatives in reference.
They're all alternatives. They have caps on them in terms of what you can do, and we are using every one of those to be able to fund our services.
I just a couple more questions. On page 4 of your handout, you showed public transit funding per capita and compared it to several cities. Do you know which one of those cities that we're being compared to have separate funding sources for transit, separate and apart from the ones the 4 that we have?
I can get you that breakdown. I can say pretty safely that any of the cities that are in Texas, they do have a transportation fund down there. It can be anywhere from a half cent to a penny sales tax that's committed to transportation funding. That's kind of across the state. So I do know that
So several of those.
Some do, not all. I can get you the specifics off the top of my head.
It'd be safe to say, that those are since we're the lowest, that a substantial number of those that are better than us.
Well, we know our compatriots in Tulsa don't have it. They're in the same boat we are. So,
yeah, okay.
And I'm not sure that we have Little Rock.
We would know Fort Worth and Austin did. There's
Yes.
two of them that do have a separate funding source.
Right.
I'd just like to know that,
Sure.
because I do think it matters when we compare ourselves to
that.
people when all our revenues are, as we've discussed, what they are, and they have, in other areas, have separate funding sources. It's a little easier to understand why their systems differ from ours. The other question is, you said that 3 of the 12 new buses are non-diesel or non...
Yeah, 3 of the 10.
3 of the 10. 2 of them were CNG and 1 of them was electric hybrid. Is the cost the reason that you didn't buy more of that kind?
The reason why we didn't buy more is, we've got a history with CNG and it hasn't been particularly good. And frankly, we're kind of viewing this as a pilot program. For years, we were the funding conduit for the city of for the Norman service through the university. Their capital money, their federal capital money would pass through us. Their president of the university had indicated that he wanted to get into CNG, and so we've been monitoring how their vehicles have performed. And so from that standpoint, we were letting them be the guinea pigs, if I could, as that technology evolved. We jumped into it in 1990 at a point in time when it was just brand new, and we had a terrible experience. We bought some buses in 97, and we just retired those last year. Better, not great. Norman's experience, better, not quite where we would want it to be. Our problem is, if we buy a bus and we can't depend on that bus in service, we don't have a whole lot of spares. And so it really puts a burden on us. You might recall, 4 years ago, I had to come and sit down with each of you individually and talk to you about our inability to make bus lineup on a regular basis, and we had to do some things. So we're really sensitive to that. Clearly, we understand the environment here and the push towards CNG, and we're sensitive to that. That's why I mentioned when we're doing our facility improvements right now, it's not cheap to modify your facility to be able to service CNG vehicles, and we are building that in to our operation. I will tell you, we did, and again, this is a pilot program, we did want to look at a hybrid electric bus, only because in general, we see a lot of transit systems moving to hybrid electric as far as the industry. So we want to balance, we want to go ahead and test them and see how they both perform. We're building for the future so that if we need to do CNG, we got that capability to do it. But we'll let it play out and see how it works and go from there.
Thank you.
Mayor, thank you. Just wanted to make a comment and compliment you, Rick, on the very thorough and comprehensive presentation this morning. And wanted to thank you and members of COPT and the city manager for setting up this transit workshop in 2 weeks. Just to begin to give us some rational way to move forward on a bus system that is just for all of us. Not what we want it to be. I think 12 to 15 years ago, Dick Coyle was asked to chair a trails committee. At that time, trails were non-existent in this city. Funding was not available, but it was a blueprint, laid out a blueprint for a master trail system in this city that with MAPS 3 will complete a comprehensive system of trails unlike anything we're going to see in this part of the country. And I want to begin to think that that kind of blueprint laid out for transit, for bus service in particular, is going to give us the ways and the means. We won't have the funding initially to start, but at least the blueprint for the steps and plans to move forward in a way that we can be proud of a system because we've got a plan to move forward. And I thank you for setting this up.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Okay.
It was a great presentation, a difficult presentation, I know, to make.
Thank you.
We have a number of citizens who have signed up to speak on transportation issues, and we'll call them in alphabetical order. I have 3 requests to make, please. As you approach the podium, as you get to the podium, please give us your name and address for the record. And the second two requests are a little more difficult. Because of the large number of people we have signed up, in deference to your fellow citizens, I would ask that you keep your comments to about 3 minutes. And the final thing is, if somebody has made the points that you wanted to make, please try not to be repetitive. New information is always valuable to us, but hearing the same thing over and over again really doesn't add much to our body of knowledge. So with that in mind, Betty Allison signed up.
Hello. Yes, my name is Betty Allison.
And your address, please?
1604 Rancho, R-E-N-C-H-O Drive. It's on the southwest, well, whichever way is south, southwest side.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's probably in his district right there. And you were skimming over Metrolink so fast that if it's always the bottom line, then what am I going to do? How am I going to get home from school? I go to school on the northwest side of town. I live on the southwest side of town. It takes 2 daytime buses to get me there, 3 Metrolink, which are a lot safer to get me home. And they run on natural gas. They always have. But I'm not the only one that is going to be affected by it. There's a lot of people that depend on it to get to work. I'm not saying the ones that drive the buses. I'm saying the ones that depend on Metrolink to get to work and from work every day. And that the day that Metrolink doesn't run, which is Saturday? All right, Saturday. I don't use it on Saturday. I don't know. You know, it's hard for them to get to and from work. And on Sundays, there's a couple right back there on the 3rd row on this side that's how they get to church on Sunday mornings and home from church on Sunday mornings. I have a friend that takes me, so I can't go into detail about that. But why does it have to be the bottom line and not how it's going to affect the majority of the people that use Metrolink just to go to the grocery store, go to church, go to school, go to work? Why do we have to suffer because that gentleman's bottom line doesn't include Metrolink? You know, I mean, I don't mind that going from $1.25 to $1.50, as long as I can get my 30-day unlimited because I can use it on Metrolink. And a lot of people think that, well, maybe only 5 people ride it 1 hour, and then 10 the next. And it fluctuates back and forth like that all the time. I depend on it because I call ahead and say, hey, can they come to 50 Penn Place, the east side, the Olive Garden side, to pick me up? And then I go down to the transfer center and get bus 84, and they take me over to Southwest 44th and Western. It's part of the Sears parking lot. But it's up way from Sears enough that it doesn't affect their, you know. But then I can get 85 to go on home.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Mrs. Allison, but could you sort of sum up what you want to say?
What am I supposed to do?
Thank you.
Spend $250 a month just for a cab one way?
Well, I wish we could solve everybody's problems, but we have some issues.
That's not just my problem. That's
I understand. But, you know, the same reason you don't buy a new car to go to work, we can't afford to spend money we don't have. At any rate, thank you very much, Mr. Allison. And your comment that we sort of glazed over MetroLink, I don't think was quite fair. We had a lot of discussion and a lot of concern up here about the services.
We're going to shut it down. We're going to shut it down, not ways to keep it going.
Well, there was lots of discussion on ways to keep it going. But anyway, Albert Blasey, or Blakesey, if I may be pronouncing it. Blakely, he's in the bathroom. Okay, we'll defer him for a moment because I'm sure that's important. Art Bradley. Mr. Bradley's. Okay, Mr. Bradley apparently is gone. Oh, Pat Bradley, I'm sorry. Pat Bradley? Okay, Mr. Bradley's here.
I'm Pat Bradley, 1935 Northwest 13th, and I've been a rider since 1959. But I've used both the regular bus system and the MetroLink, and they're apples and oranges. I have a son who has a disability, and I do myself partly because of somebody who wasn't driving right and broke my neck in the car and so forth. So I'd like to speak also for some of the people. You know, we have a church called Redemption Church, and they are helping to keep people who are in the Department of Corrections system. They may be on work release. They are trying to keep them in contact with their families, and not just church services, but socially with their families, to reduce recidivism. In other words, going back in the joint. And a lot of these people work just the minimum paid jobs. If they're going to be a little late getting back, the driver calls ahead and lets them know so they don't get in trouble. And there are plenty of people who are not in that system also who are working those jobs. Some of the people are getting, maybe not to, but from one of several medical clinics that are in the evenings, which is all they can afford anyway. One lady has cancer and diabetes and problems with her walking. She can get to Olivet Church for their Integris clinic with 2 buses. It takes her 3 of the Metrolinks to get home, but at least she can. Metrolink also is much safer, and by that I mean for people with a disability. And by the way, they all have lifts on them. If somebody needs help with a wheelchair, or if you use a cane or whatever, they'll take care of it. As an older woman, I find it much safer, and particularly in the winter when it gets dark so early. I could maybe take a bus home and it's already dark, and it's not really that safe to walk home. And because of physical limitations, I can't really carry as much as I used to, so carrying the groceries and whatnot. If you got canned goods or a bottle of bleach or juice or whatever, maybe a bag of cat food or kitty litter, whatever.
Mrs. Bradley, if I could ask you to sort of sum up now, please.
Okay. I have here approximately 35 pages of signed petition to the City Council. Some of the pages are complete, a few are not complete, and some of them made their own lines on the back of the page so that they could add more people on that. And we'd like to,
we'd be glad to take it.
for all of us, turn those over.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is, and I'll try to read this better than I did the other names, Julie Brantley.
My name is Julie Brantley, and I live at 4804 Northwest 26th Street in Oklahoma City. Basically, I am visually impaired, and I work with people who are visually impaired. And our main problem we have of getting jobs for people is that they can't get to work. And we have a lot of people who want to work but cannot afford to pay cabs or even with share fare to go to work all the time. They are dependent on the bus system. A lot of our people develop blindness after they're older. So they're established in a part of Oklahoma City where there's no transportation. If they really want to go to work, they have to move themselves and their families to be able to go to work. So basically, we really need a good transportation system in Oklahoma City to support our economy so that people can work. And that's basically all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marilyn Brown.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Brown. I live at 413 West Britain Road. My only concern is I didn't qualify because I was out of the zone area for Metrolink. I qualified for the service. My situation is that I'm unemployed right now, and due to the transportation system, I was proposed 2 jobs, which I could not take because we don't have extended hours. Most of the jobs that some of us have to take are hospitals, hotels, restaurants. You do not supply transportation that meets some needs for those people who have to work at night. And I was had a situation. I worked at Presbyterian Hospital, and I was allowed to be changed to shift. But what would have better met my need and my situation and the staffing was that I could work at night, but I couldn't because I did not have transportation. So I was stuck with working on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and the buses don't run on Sunday, so I paid an average of $46.75 every Sunday, where I only made $50. Like I said, the Metrolink, I was out of the catchment area, and so that doesn't impact me as well, but it does impact other people. But once again, I was not allowed to take 2 jobs that I was recently offered because they wanted night people. And most of those jobs, and I'm on Social Security, but most of the jobs are those type of services to people. And I've also noticed that because if you all could, in the future, transportation, extend the hours, because I worked in a hospital in the ER, and we had patients who had to wait overnight, sleeping on the waiting room chairs, because there was no system to take them after they had waited 6 to 8 to 9 hours for service at an emergency room, to then have to stay 6, 7, 8 hours until the bus system started the next morning. So we're all concerned. I understand the budget cuts. I understand that very well, and I understand for the price increase. I have no problem with the price increase. Yes, I too am on limited income, so if that means I don't get an asthma inhaler for the month so I can get to my doctor and go where I need to go, then that's the sacrifice I make. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Ray Crowder.
I'm Ray Crowder. I live at 2924 West Hill here in Oklahoma City. I am a supervisor at New View, Oklahoma, and our primary goal is to employ blind, visually impaired people. And most of these people, of course, as myself, are limited on transportation. Not being able to drive, I depend upon public transportation, and of course, as has been mentioned many times, things like taxi cabs. No one can afford to take a cab daily to work or anything. I use the bus system, mostly the route systems. I don't have the need for the Metrolift, so I don't have as much to say about that. I do know that one thing that wasn't covered as much in regards to the increase of prices, which I don't have a problem with. I understand budget concerns. I understand the need. It's been a few years since there's been an increase. One thing about the transfers going away, I know that when I ride the bus daily, most of the people are paying with cash, so they're not using passes. And in addition to that, a one-day pass costing $4 may benefit someone who rides to and from work. But let's say that a person has the issue of they have a buddy who takes them to work, but they have to depend upon a bus to get home. Well, if it takes them 2 buses because of the actual location that they're going to and the direction in which they having to change, then their $1.25 fare, which now becomes $1.50, they're now having to pay $3. Well, it's not worth them to get a day pass. So all I'm saying is that it affects many people in different ways. But primarily, it doesn't affect me because I do use a pass. But I did believe that that was important to recognize that just did not come out much in the conversation. Beyond that, I'd like to see the city do as much as it can to help Metro Transit and the public transit as a whole. I know there's a lot of focus on many things, and it often seems like the city's focus gets to doing things for tourism, things to bring people in town, and I understand that. But when lots of things get glazed over in helping public transportation, the city sidewalks, which are in most places non-existent, many things like that for myself and others who do not drive, or if a person's going to a city, going to a corner store or something and doesn't need to have their car, well, there's not even sidewalks on. I live on a major thoroughfare, and there are sidewalks here or there. It's spotty at best. And anyway, my point is I'd like to see the city take a focus toward the people here in the city. I understand tourism is important. I understand bringing in dollars, and we all want to do that. But my focus, I do believe, needs to be toward helping the people here in the city to conduct business. And obviously,
if Mr. Crowder, if you could sort of sum up now, please.
I'm finished as done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's Joel Darling.
Joel Darling.
Hello. My name is Joel Darling, and I live at 4 Southwest 41st. And I have some issues concerning MetroLink. I'd like to continue riding it, but a lot of people that ride it are disabled. They can't drive, can't afford a car, work at night when buses are not running, or work part-time jobs. And I enjoy riding MetroLink, and I've worked at the federal buildings for several years, 17 years, and I don't know if I would be able to hang on to my job if they was to cancel MetroLink. And I don't know, I thought of a solution, run buses until midnight, maybe, a solution, if they got rid of MetroLink or whatever. And thanks for letting me voice my opinion.
Thank you, sir. Darlene Ferguson.
I'm Darlene Ferguson, and I live at 3674 North Lottie. That's northeast side.
And you might pull that microphone up just a little bit.
Hi, I'm Darlene Ferguson, and I live at 3674 North Lottie, apartment 8. That's northeast side. And I don't think that y'all should do away with the MetroLink because it does support us that can't get around, don't have a car. And I just think if y'all can find another way to keep MetroLink, it would be great. I appreciate it for everybody. And myself, I see a lot of people have turned out here, so this is a big concern. So whatever you can do would be great. Appreciated by us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. James Gates. Maybe he must have gone.
No, he's coming.
Oh, he's coming. Oh, I see him over here. Thank you.
My name is James Gates. I live at 2200 North Coltrane in far east Oklahoma City. And I just want to say that Metrolink does take us there. They take us there on Sundays, and they can take us there when the big buses quit at night. And it's very important to have this service. It really is. You know, the old cliche is you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Let's not let this transportation leave us, because we do need it. We do. Thank you, Council, for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Nydia Harding-Hill.
Hi, Nita Harding-Hill. I live at 1723 Northeast 18th. And I just want to say Metrolinx has been a blessing to me. I work at night at a hospital, and it's just helpful for me to get back and forth to work. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Pan Holloway.
Hello, I'm Pam Holloway, and I'm visually impaired. I live in Bethany. I live at 6729 Northwest 52nd, and that is a mile from where I can connect with the 8 bus on 63rd. I've been visually, legally blind since 2005, and I went back to college, had to do a career change, and I got training. And now I work at Shepherd Mall and Visual Services and working with blind people. And if it wasn't for the bus, I couldn't get to work. So I just really, I understand the situation, and I appreciate what the man said about his concern about, you know, the man that talked quite a bit. I appreciate what he said, and if there's any way possible, I wish that you could come up with funding. I don't ride Metrolink. I think that's very important. But when you see cuts, it's kind of disheartening because, you know, from what I understand, there's been cuts from year to year to year. And us that can't drive, it's really hard. I guess there would be some way I could keep my job, but it would really put me in a financial bind if I had to ride a cab every day or pay someone to take me every day, because it would be a lot more. Anyway, I appreciate all you're doing, and I just hope that you're able to keep these things going and not have to take cuts.
Thank you very much.
I think it's Jean Jones.
Jean Jones.
Hello, my name is Jean Jones. I live at 2801 Carlton Way. That's actually in the Village. I work in Oklahoma City and have been a longtime resident previously of Oklahoma City for about 3 decades. I also work for the State Department of Rehabilitation Services, and we are the agency that prepares people with disabilities to work, to be employed. In Oklahoma, we have almost 600,000 citizens with disabilities, and that means that it's about 1/6 of our population. So in Oklahoma City proper, we're looking at close to 100,000 individuals who have disabilities of one kind or another. Those of an employment age participate at a very low rate in the labor market, but amongst those who do, about 39% are employed, compared to close to 80% of people without disabilities. Hope you can hear me. I think I'm kicking in and out there. So basically, people with disabilities are employed at less than half the rate of people without disabilities. One of the big reasons for that, of course, is the lack of adequate transportation. Regardless of what you do in this particular instance, I think it is important that you recognize that people with disabilities can be a great economic resource to this specific community, and that until we have a more elaborate public transportation system, the level of that contribution is going to be limited. Hopefully, the ultimate solution will be in the development of some form of dedicated funding for public transit. That is where the real permanent solution lies. In the meantime, if you find yourself able to restore some of the projected cuts, I think that would be extremely helpful, particularly those that have anything to do with supporting employment of this population. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Adina Moore, I'm sorry.
Good evening. My name is Adina Moore. I have a letter here.
Mrs. Moore, may we have your address, please, for our record?
215 Northeast 28th, Northeast Side, right behind the State Capitol building.
Thank you very much.
Okay. My name is Adina Moore. I work for a parking garage, but I do not drive. And I have a letter I'd like to read to you. Now, if you'd like to have it, you can have it afterwards. My name is Adina Moore. I'm a resident of downtown Oklahoma City. I understand that the MetroLink bus system is in jeopardy. I'm here today to defend it. I do not drive. I rely heavily on the system, as do many of my friends. Choice of eliminating MetroLink would affect many hardworking individuals who may be forced out of work. This is what I do not understand. I just would like to comprehend the thought or process behind taking out a portion of a great city population transportation. Public transportation is necessary in any multi-population area, and removing it would give the impression that our city is moving the wrong direction. I love Oklahoma City. I always enjoy living and working here. But after this news, I feel like Oklahoma City is greatly loved, have turned me away to save a few bucks. I understand that there are other transportation options like cabs, and being on a fixed income paid 4 or 5 times would pay for MetroLink is really not realistic. I also know many people who use the MetroLink on Sundays who have vehicles. Please reconsider this monumental mistake in keeping MetroLink in place. I know it's absolutely no effect on people who have the final decision, but it would be crushing blow to all the smaller people, and your citizens are the ones who make the city what it is. Thank you very much for your time and thoughtful consideration. I do ride the MetroLink. I cannot ride it during the week, because I'm one of the few. The MetroLink don't ride as late as I get off. I don't get off till 11 o'clock, and I can't make it to 11:15 to get over there to them, because I don't usually finish with my job till about 11:30. So I cannot make the evening bus, but I do make the Sunday bus, because I do work on Sundays. And that would put me in a bind in more ways than one, to have either somebody pick me up and pay them to pick me up on Sunday, or take a cab. You know, I do get the cab tickets, but I have to use them for other important things too, like get home from the grocery store. So it's just like we don't have enough of them to go around as it is. They're only allowed 6 per month. So I would like to see if you change your mind about closing down MetroLink and leaving it open, because it really is important that we keep MetroLink open so people like me and some others can get around. Thank you.
Thank you much, Mrs. Moore. And if you want to leave a copy of that letter with it, we'd be glad to have it. Thank you very much. Okay. Gladys Menley.
Hello, my name is Gladys Nunley. I stay at 4736 Shadow Brook Drive. I am concerned because I get up I ride a big bus every day, and I like to go to church on the Sunday, and I like to shop on the Sunday, and Metrolink is a great help. I have problems. I got adjusted heart failure. The doctor told me stay in bed. I just can't stay still. I want to get out, and Metrolink do help me out. And that's my family. And I want to keep the service on. And I know y'all say, talking about cutting budget, baby, y'all don't want to cut nothing because it's not worth it. Because I'm going to tell you something. Nowadays, you can't get to point A to point B without somebody harass you, walking up the street, riding up the street, trying to do everything to you. No, I don't get out. I said that if I can't get nowhere, if Metrolink not there, I'm in the house. And I can't, I don't like that. It look like I'm locked up in prison, and that's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Knight. Diane Raines.
My name is Diane Raines. I live at 1228 Northeast 7th Street. And basically, it's a lot of us out here, like I say, low income and fixed incomes, and I'm a single lady that needs helping hand as far as Metrolink. I get off at night, which today I got off at graveyard, but I work at night, and it's really safe. And as far as cabs these days, you can't depend on the cabs, and the Metrolink is really dependable. You might have to go a little earlier than usual in order to be there on time because, of the load that they have to pick up, but it's really dependable and it's safe for me. As far as cabs, it's hours at a time, and you can't work like that. And as far as back to the safety part of it, like I say, me as a single lady not driving and everything, I don't live that far away from my home, but Metrolink makes sure that I get home safe at night, and I appreciate that. And I just wish that anything that you can do to keep it going would be a great help to a lot of people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raines. Joanne Samuels.
I just want to say,
Ms. Samuels, may I have your name and address?
I'm sorry,
record,
Joanne
please?
Samuels at 2625 Northeast 17th Street.
Thank you very much.
I just want to say, I used to catch the regular city bus, but I live in a neighborhood recently where there are a lot of pit bulls, and I have physical disabilities that I'm just not in a position to run from. I am riding Metro Lift during the day, but on Sundays, the reason Metrolink is so important, I hadn't been able to go to church in months. And Metrolink, has given me that gift of being able to do that. Without that, I've come in contact with young people riding Metrolink trying to go to school. There are people trying to go to work. And whether anybody else feels it or not, it is very important for people to worship on Sundays. I don't know how you all feel about it, but that is a big part of my life. And to be without that takes a lot out of me as a human being. That's all I need to say.
Thank you, Ms. Stuart Spencer. Thank you, sir.
I hope, I'll just speak without the microphone. I think
We may have your name and address for the record,
All
and the
right.
microphone would be helpful for the people.
All right, that's fine. My name is Stuart Spanier. I reside at 7401 Southwest 74th and May. Mr. Walters is my councilman. I rise in support of Metrolink, mainly because I have no transportation. That is to say, I do not have a car. I use Metrolink 5 out of the 7 days. I find that it is convenient and it saves me the expense of a car, especially with gasoline in that neck of the woods. I'd like to address the fact that I do work from midnight to 8, but I am not adverse to coming in early if that's what it takes to preserve Metrolink through consolidation of routes. Leaving at 7 o'clock in the evening or 8 o'clock in the evening is a viable option for me. If you decide Metrolink is not to survive, then I urge you to consider authorizing an extension of Metro Transit. The Metro Lift service is comparable, at least in terms of transportation. I hope that I don't have to go the route of a car, because if I do go the route of a car, why do I care about public transportation? I'll have enough fun as it is maintaining my car. I thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir.
Deborah, and that starts with a T.
Deborah, and I'm sorry I can't read your last name on this thing. Is there a lady named Deborah who would like to speak on the transit issue? Pardon me?
It starts with a T. That's the
2625 Northeast 17th. She's already gone. Okay. Thank you. Kathy Tutton? Touton?
Hi, my name is Kathy Touton. I live at 1835 Northwest 42nd Street. Sam Bowman is my city councilman. I'm here to talk today about the concern of, I realize tourist is important for making money, but I don't want us to forget the people who live here and work here every day. I ride the buses Monday through Sunday, every single day. I talk to a lot of people, and from all the people I've talked to, because I also ride Metrolink, all the people I've talked to, they're either disabled or they're in a low-income bracket, so they can't afford vehicles, or them owning and maintaining them. And it seems like a lot of what's going into maps is focused on tourists, and I think we need to concentrate on the people who have to live and survive here every day. And a lot of people who I talk to, which I talk to thousands on a weekly basis, because I ride them every day, and it's either they're disabled, not able to drive, or they can't afford it because of the cost. And so Metrolink is very important so people can get to work and to school and to church and anything else they need to do. And so if there's any way to salvage it at all in any form, it would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And a name we called a while ago, and the gentleman was not here, Albert Blakely.
My name's Albert Blakely. I live at 215 Northeast 28th Street. I take Metrolink on Sunday. I work way out at Western and Memorial. Granted, it only gets me there halfway. I have to take a cab the rest of the way. If you knock out Metrolink, that's going to knock out a lot of people that do jobs, that have jobs on Sundays. If you knock it out, get a Sunday bus service going. That sounds feasible, running it on a Saturday line. I definitely like Mr. White's idea about adding in an extra $1 or $2 for parking, because these guys, he's running two subjects, public transportation, public parking. That's conflicting interests, totally conflicting interests. You run an extra $1 or $2 and run it towards public transportation, that would work out a lot better, saving the city money and also helping out the community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else who didn't have an opportunity to sign up who would like to address the council on the matter of public transportation, keeping in mind our caveat of 3 minutes and not being repetitive? Okay, well, thank you very much. I want to apologize to the people whose names I might have mispronounced. It's partially a vision problem of mine and probably part of lack of attention. Anyway, I do apologize for that. I thank you all for your comments. They're very thoughtful and they will be helpful as we go forward. I hope you have a sense that transportation is important to members of the council. We are very much concerned in providing this service to the city. What I think is lacking is a long-term, reliable, dependable source of funding for this, and that's something that we probably won't be able to solve for this budget process, but we certainly need to devote some attention to. I've been on the council 6 years, and it seems like every year we scramble around to find $1,000 or $100,000 here or there to extend some service, and that is, it's okay, but it's not any way to really do it well. We need to find some kind of a permanent, long-term source of funding that we can rely on and that we can provide the kind of service that our citizens demand. So, with that, thank you very much for your comments. We'll go on to the rest of our agenda. You're welcome to stay, but if you have other things to do and want to leave, we'll give you a moment or two to clear the hall so we can, before we get our next thing started. I'll be signing right up here.
Right above your name.
Okay.
Oh, those names. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I call the meeting to order now, and so we can proceed. The next presentation, as part of our Finance Committee report, is from the Information Technology section. And
Shad Meldren is here this morning, and many of you don't know Shad. Shad has been our IT director now permanently for just a little about a month.
That's about right.
A little less than that. He's been with the city for a good number of years, and he's been the acting director for about 6 or 8 months before that. So, Shad, welcome. This is Shad's first budget presentation to us.
Well, good morning. That's a tough one to follow, so I appreciate the opportunity to present the IT budget to you. My name is Shad Meldrum. I want to recognize some people who are in the audience with us from IT. Felice Ponkilla, who keeps the money flowing, of course. Carrie Wagnon is one of our division managers, and Ralph Gibson. Okay, next slide. I want to start with LFR, which is the program in the city, Leading for Results. Start with our mission statement. The mission of the Information Technology Department is to provide business solutions and technology services to city departments so we can better serve the Oklahoma City community. Those two key pieces are pretty important, the business solutions, technology services, which I'll reference later. Next slide. Accomplishment highlights from last year. We had significant server infrastructure capital cost reduction through virtualization. It's new technology that's out there. We reduced our server capital cost by 1/6 through this technology. That creates additional complexity on staff to manage all that. That is important. Important point 2 is animal welfare. Mobile computing implementation for field workers is ongoing right now, so we're getting 10 units out there for those guys. The Acela permit system expanded for fire, stormwater quality, and subdivision and zoning to increase efficiency. So we'll have more. We'll have up to 75 field inspectors using units in the field. Implementation of voice over IP for courts to improve call management. That was an important piece that was accomplished last year. We're now providing paperless utility bills for customers, which citizens had asked for. We also supported the implementation of SAP for utility billing. That was a huge project that was completed. Some others that aren't up there that I want to recognize is we continue as a staff to maintain high customer service, high feedback, and high uptime. So all that happens. That's the same. It's been going from year to year, so that's an important point. Two other ones that aren't up there is the Maps for Kids support continues. So that's a huge project that continues on for the next few years, and that's been supported with one person basically. And the other is the expansion of the radio system. We now have Bethany, Yukon, Mustang, and War Acres on our radio system, which is important for interoperability. Next slide. Following on Leading for Results, I want to highlight some department issues and strategic results. The one department issue that we wanted to recognize was growing demand, which is pretty important now. The increasing gap between available resources and the growing demand for analysis, implementation, and support of information communication systems will result in inability to provide new services, longer response time, customer dissatisfaction, delay in project implementation, and increased security vulnerability. This basically was developed 3 to 4 years ago when we started the LFR process, so it's interesting to see a lot of this happening now. The graph there shows what's happened over the last decade with the IT budget. Basically, our budget has increased by almost 3 times or more than 3 times. But staff-wise, we'll be next year at lower staff than we were in 2000. So our staff resources have not gone up to support all this technology. Next slide. Strategic result is tied to that demand. The Information Technology Department will ensure that services provided to departments meet or exceed service level agreements. These service level agreements are annual agreements. We go and meet with departments to come to agreement on what we're going to provide for them. So, of course, we try to provide as much service as we can with the resources we have available. The measure tied to that is at least 95% of IT survey respondents will rate IT services good or excellent. We set a high target on that at 95%. That's what we try to achieve. Based on results so far, we're about 90.5%, which is excellent. Next slide. The next department issue we wanted to highlight was new technology. Continued funding of technology without appropriate staffing and resources to sustain the investments after initial purchase will result in ineffective use of technology, increased risk of project failure, unacceptable returns on investment, increased risk to existing systems. So this graph shows, as a citywide, how much we've invested in technology the last 7 years. So it's been significant investments. Each one of these investments typically will add about 20% for ongoing costs to maintain that. That does not include staff. So big investments in technology to make the city better and more efficient. So next slide. Strategic result tied to this, the Information Technology Department will ensure that technology expenditures will be aligned with city goals and resources in the most secure and effective way. So we want to make sure all these dollars that invest in technology are done as appropriately as possible and are not wasted. The measure tied to that, 100% of executive staff will report that technology expenditures are aligned with organizational goals. So again, we go through lots of processes, have an IT staff involved to make sure that every dollar spent on technology has a meaningful result and provides improved efficiency and service for the city and citizens. You can see there our target's real high. We set it at 100%. That would be the ultimate goal. We run at about 90% on feedback from executive staff. The department structure, this is according to budget that I want to hit real quick. So as we go through lines of business. Top, of course, is administration. Under administration is a Maps for Kids support to manage those technology projects for Maps for Kids, and security, which is an important component of the IT department for the city. Customer support, under that is a service desk and technology training. I wanted to note that technology training has never had a staff member in it, so that's one we show as a program that we've never had a resource applied to. Application support. Public safety application support, I wanted to highlight in there that does include facility management for the Public Safety Communications Center. Departmental systems, enterprise business applications, which includes PeopleSoft and SAP. The last one is geographic information systems. The next line of business, technology enhancements. This is the group that helps move forward with what departments want to do and where we need to go as a city. Under them is development services. Database systems, which actually manage all the databases for all these enterprise systems that are in place. And last is project management. I wanted to highlight project management. Technology projects tend to fail as an industry from poor project management. We have pretty strict project management processes and staff that are really good at managing those for the city. The last one is our infrastructure. That includes configuration management. They manage all the desktops and licensing for software. Network and telecommunications, public safety communication support, which includes radio and all the mobile data computers, and then servers. One thing we highlighted on here so you can see is red indicates areas where we will have staff reduction in programs. So you can see across the board we had significant reductions. Next slide. So our proposed budget is a little over $18 million. That represents a 12.54% overall reduction in our operating budget. The two options up there for comparison, what I wanted to highlight is option 2, that's a 12.4% reduction in staff, so we'd be reducing staff by 12. Compared to option 1, which we would basically have 4 staff return, they would return to service desk functions mostly and some of our application support. Next slide. I wanted to give a budget breakdown of the department for awareness. Of course, all the funding for our department really is for other departments' technology that they use to do their business. 51% of our budget is for public safety functions. That includes police, fire, and court. So that's a significant part of what we do. The picture there shows, if you didn't know, we do installs of all the equipment for police and fire vehicles and all the rest of the vehicles in the city. That includes radios, mobile data computers. For police vehicles, that even includes installing light bars and cages in the back of the vehicle. So we take care of all that within our department. Next slide. Technology maintenance is a key piece. All this technology that the city's invested in has to be maintained. And of course, as new versions of software come out, they have new capabilities, which we want to take advantage of. If we don't stay current on technology, the vendors that supply us the software will basically not support us over time. So we have to continue to stay current on what we have in place. But basically, a significant portion of our budget is for required maintenance. So when we looked at cutting stuff, we really looked at what could we cut as far as maintenance versus people. So most of our cut was on the people side. We did cut maintenance on some smaller applications that hopefully we can replace within the next few years, but basically those applications will stay static. To achieve the cut requested also, we even cut our own internal systems for IT, some of the systems we use to manage our own business. So we did what we could to make the required cut. Contractual obligations from last year to this year increased by 5.2%. So new technology was put in place, increased cost for electricity on the radio system of the Public Safety Communications Center resulted in a 5% increase in our budget or for contractual obligations. The last point there I wanted to make, one thing we've done as IT over the years is centralize technology from departments, and that has resulted in significant cost reductions. One area that I would highlight would be just in the phone systems. We've centralized all the bills and found significant savings in centralizing the bills, but and I'll talk about that later when we talk about impacts of the cuts. Next slide. The first line of business is administration to go through. So they provide security leadership and management support functions for our department. Included in that, like I had talked about, is a Maps for Kids technology project management and security. For both option 1 and 2, we're proposing a 2.7 staff reduction. The impact on this will be a reduction in strategic technology leadership. We'll have less people at this level to look at strategic direction for technology. The picture there is ongoing projects with Maps for Kids technology support, which will continue for the next few years. Next project. Customer support is our next area. They provide service desk and technology training functions. This is important because this is the first point of contact for our customers, which are users within the city. We are proposing significant cuts to service desk functions to try to preserve our staff for maintaining operations, other systems. So with option 1, it'd be a 0.67 staff reduction. Option 2 would be 2.67, and basically that would leave 1 staff member in this area. So this is the people that you would call to if you have a problem or to get response for different things. Next slide. So the impact of this customer service reduction will be decrease from 3 call takers to 1. We'll be seeing longer wait times and more users bypassing service desks for support, which we're already seeing. This is the point of contact for users, so already now they're calling service desks, not able to get through. They're calling staff directly, which reduces their effectiveness. We expect to see decreased satisfaction from city users, so they used to get a high level of service from service desks, and that's when we had a staff with 3 people. There could be indirect impact on city services due to longer wait times to resolve issues. It used to be, we're already seeing the service desk resolving less than half of the calls that they're getting now. So it used to be the service desk could resolve a lot of issues, user issues on the initial call. Next slide. The next line of business, technology application support. They provide application support services directly to city users. One thing I want to highlight there is that the facility management for the Public Safety Communication Center is included in this line of business in the budget. We're reducing this area in option 1 by 1.75 staff. Option 2 is 3.75 staff, or 13%. 2 things I want to highlight there that you may not be aware of is a fuel management system that the city uses, many sites in that. And then something we accomplished this last year is development services field technology, which, again, I said 75 inspectors are using in the field right now. Next slide. Service impact to application support. We're going to see more of our staff resources allocated to high priority applications. So some of our lower end systems that every department uses, they're going to see longer wait times to get issues resolved. So we'll be focused more on public safety, our PeopleSoft system, and SAP systems for utility billing. There could be a high-risk increased downtime for critical systems with reduced staff. The staff done an excellent job over the years of keeping downtime to a minimum and supporting the applications, but we could see increased downtime. One critical thing is there's no redundancy in knowledge and skills. If we have a lot of applications where there's typically one person that knows how it works and one person to support it. So if they're off or on vacation or sick, then if something happens with that application, then we're scrambling to maybe try to find them on vacation, but to get it resolved. And again, in this area, there's no end-user technology training services. This has been a big request from departments for more technology training, and we just don't have the staff to provide it. 2 things there just happened recently. The Tornado Command Center was set up a few weeks ago. We have the capability to set up mobile communications for them, and we were actually able to do that with the systems we have in place we've invested in over the last few years. We were able to accomplish that for them in 1 hour, which is pretty amazing. So the command center was set up. They had network support out there for their operations. And the other thing there is the Public Safety Communication Center, which we support fully. Next one. Technology enhancements. This is a group that provides new technology. They identify new technology and implementation services for city departments. In this area, in the budget, includes all of our database maintenance. They maintain over 100 enterprise databases. Right now, we have basically 1.5 people assigned to perform that function. Option 1 and Option 2 are the same. We're proposing a 0.4 staff reduction, or 3%. One thing I want to say about this is a little misleading because we've already somewhat rated this line of business to allocate staff to other areas that we need them. The picture there shows the OKC garage sale permit citizen access application that we put up last year. So as citizens come in to register or to get permits for garage sales, it's automatically made available through okc.gov. So people looking for garage sales can go out there and see what's going on in the city. So that's an added benefit of getting your permit. Next one. Technology enhancement service impact. Additional staff reductions due to reassignment to other more critical areas. So we've taken staff from this area and assigned them to application support and some of our infrastructure areas. There's going to be a reduced ability to meet business technology needs. So departments are continuing to want to move forward with technology, and this is the area that we provide that service that we'll have reduced ability to do that. And the last one there, tied to our mission statements, reduce business solution services. This is where we see a big impact in the reduction. The pictures there, the intelligent transportation system implementation is ongoing right now. We're working with Public Works to test that, support that. All 700 traffic signals will report back and be on the network so they can be managed centrally. And the one in the lower right-hand corner is animal welfare mobile computers, which they've just finished a pilot, and we've purchased the units to begin implementing that. So that should improve animal welfare efficiency. Next slide. Infrastructure is another key area. This is basically the backbone that makes all this stuff work. They provide public safety communications, network, telecommunications, server, radio, and client services to city departments. This is a fairly big area of our budget at $8 million. Both option 1 and 2 are the same. We're proposing a 2.5 staff reduction, and really to begin with, we were at minimum staff levels in this area already. So, but that's 7%. And again, that's a picture of our staff doing installs of the public safety communication systems in the police vehicles, which includes more than just the public safety communication systems, includes the light bars and everything like that. And then picture the network infrastructure. Next one. Service impact in this area. We're fearful of a high-risk increased downtime for critical systems. There's, again, no redundancy in knowledge and skills in this area. There's no potential cross-train, so if we have people out or whatever, then we could have potential issues. Possible increased costs for third-party vendor support. If we have to bring somebody in, then we'll have to pay a third-party vendor, and typically they're at least 4 times as expensive as has a staff member to do the same work. Next one. So the summary of a budget impact: decreased resources for strategic technology initiatives across the city. There's going to be an increased focus on critical support functions of existing technology. There'll be a high risk of increased downtime for critical systems. We're going to be expanding responsibilities for staff beyond stable capacity. Decreased customer satisfaction and risk of increased technology decentralization. And that's important because departments are going to continue to want to move forward with technology. Typically, they may try to go out and try to do it on their own when we don't have the resources to apply it, and that'll be more expensive in the long run. Next slide. So this is closing, and I just want to recognize the IT staff. A lot of things happen day to day that aren't aware to people. There's always critical issues going on, and the staff will, any holiday weekend that has an extra day, they're jumping on doing application upgrades and maintenance. So, 4th of July weekend and all that seems to be time that a lot of activities happen. They propose to do stuff at night without complaining, and we get calls all hours of the day, and so they've really stepped up to make things happen. But we really are reaching the point where we're critical with resources.
On this issue of the animal control, could you kind of give me more information as to what this service is actually going to do? What will it improve in reference to addressing the issue of animal control as far as people who call for serious issues of dogs?
Well, they typically will call into the 911 center, and it used to be that they would try to dispatch through radio or call animal welfare themselves and do the dispatch that way. They didn't have computers in the field, so their responses to those calls would be somewhat delayed, and then typically they wouldn't get the information back on what actually happened with that. Now these field computers will give them, they'll actually have the mobile CAD software within their vehicles to be able to do self-dispatch. They'll also have the new animal welfare system that we implemented for them to be able to do some of their tracking. And I know that Bob Tiener talked some about that in his presentation.
And how many patrol cars do we have cameras in?
Cameras? I don't think we have any. No cameras. Not in patrol cars.
Are there any plans for that?
I think it's been discussed, but that's for the police department for them to decide. I think we were putting one in the emergency manager's vehicle.
Sure.
Sir?
Oh, I thought you had the answers to that.
No, I don't have the answer to that. But I do want to point out that that's something that we've discussed.
Okay.
You know, it's again a matter of priorities and resources in the police department. I want to point out on this department in particular, this is not a department where citizens are calling you on a day-to-day basis saying, gosh, we need some more resources in the IT department. The departments might think that, but the citizens aren't doing that. Because we go forward, this is a department that has just slightly over 100 employees, and with option 2, they will be eliminating 12 of those employees as we go into this budget year. They do a great job. We've got great people in that department. They're very dedicated, very well trained, very resourceful. But taking 12% of that workforce out will have an impact as we go forward. But again, it's not one where people are talking about fish hatcheries, they're talking about transit routes, they're talking about concerns over other employees eliminated. But it's a significant impact of this operation to eliminate 12 people out of the department.
A question on that 12 people, Jim or River. How many of those are positions that are vacant right now, and how many people will actually have to leave?
I think there were 5 filled positions, and as far as the work I've done with personnel, I think most of those people will be placed.
Are you only talking about losing 7?
Well, we're leaving
or is it 9?
12 positions. 7 of those are vacant at this point.
Okay.
5 of those are presently occupied that we're trying to place elsewhere within the city.
And the note on top of that, we have 6 additional vacant positions, and I know that's kind of strange. That's the area we need to have resources applied to. So essentially right now, compared to this time last year, we're 18% staff-wise below where we were.
Well, I understand that. I was looking for the impact on the people that are working right now. And from what I'm hearing back, 5 people will either have to find another position in the city or will be let go. And the rest are vacant positions. And being a former IT director, I'm really concerned about what this is going to do to our critical systems, to our public safety and things like that. So I think we need to really take this with a joint. This is really a serious type of thing for the ongoing quality of service that the city is able to provide for its citizens. It's behind the scenes, but it's going to rear its ugly head if things go south.
What?
Thank you, Mayor. Chad, you mentioned several times no redundancy in knowledge and skills. Does that mean that some of these areas are so specialized that it just doesn't work to cross-train, or the cost of training more of your IT people so that they'd be cross-trained is an additional cost that we don't have?
It's a lack of sheer numbers to be able to cross-train. So we have so many systems. What we do is so broad, and the scope of services of what we take care of is so broad. We've ended up where we have individuals that know that piece of technology, and that's it. And, there's no other individuals to be able to train because they themselves have their own stuff they specialize in. So
could you give us just a very practical or specific example of some one function that's on, and that person happens to be on vacation, because you said earlier, we may have to be calling them on the cell phone to get us back in. What might such a situation be?
Well, a good example would be the SIRE system that does the agenda management that we use to run these meetings. We have one person assigned to take care of that, and he relies on the vendor to support him, but his manager over him may know a little bit, but we have one guy taking care of the SIRE system at this point. That's across the board on these things. That the fuel management system, M5, we have one person that maintains that. So when these people aren't here, we're scrambling, and typically we do call people on vacation and ask them questions.
All right, our next budget presentation will be done by Russell Klaus, our planning director, and then we'll go with that.
This out of the way. Unless you'd like.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to present the Planning Department budget this morning. I am Russell Klaus, the Planning Director. Our budget is included on page 327 of your budget books. Just to begin with, in terms of the mission statement for the Planning Department, is to provide comprehensive community planning and economic development services to current and future Oklahoma City residents and businesses so that they can live and work in vibrant and sustainable neighborhoods and business districts. And in effect, that means that we are very much about the whole community, and what we try to do is to be as effective as possible in enhancing quality of life issues for the city and ensuring that both public and private enterprise can operate as efficiently as possible. So it's a very comprehensive approach, and we do a lot of work with the other departments to ensure that we're all on the same page in accomplishing that goal. Our organizational structure, we have 3 lines of business. Administration heads that up, but we have community development, which is managed by Wiley Rice, who's division manager there, urban redevelopment, which is managed by Robbie Kenzel, and then comprehensive planning and urban design, which is managed by Susan Miller. We have 43 positions in total. Our organizational structure, as you can see, the majority of our staff are included in the community development division. We have 20 positions there. That includes the housing rehabilitation division that we acquired from Neighborhood Services last year with the departmental reorganization. We also lost the current planning division, which went to Bob Tina's group in development services. We have 7 staff in urban redevelopment. We have 12 staff in comprehensive planning and urban design, and then 4 in administration. These are the key budget changes, and this is equally applicable for option 1 and option 2. Our front receptionist is Office Specialist 1, retired within the last fiscal year, and we elected not to replace that position in anticipation of proposed what we anticipated would be budget cuts. We have replaced that with an auto attendant phone system as well as a bell. And that is actually working quite well. It's not ideal, but we have to make sacrifices, and in terms of the delivery of services, we felt that this was a position that was more acceptable to cut than others. We deleted a Planet 2 position in the urban redevelopment division. With that change from current planning going to development services, our ratio of federal funding to general funding within the budget has changed, so there is a much larger proportion now of federal funding supporting the department's operations. So we have apportioned some of those salaries from general fund to federal fund in the administration division. So my salary and Clint's and the 2 other staff in administration now have a higher proportion of federal funding there. It's not an ideal solution, but we hope that we can ride past the current budget difficulties and then be able to restore some of that to general fund. We did have partial funding for a position in the Public Information Office. We were supporting 60% of the position there, and we have deleted that position as well, and of course have updated our strategic business plan. In terms of our budget, we have almost $640,000 in administration, and 25% of that is grant funded. Community development, urban redevelopment, you can really see the extent of the federal funding here. Community development is 99% funded out of federal funds, and urban redevelopment division is 95%. So that's a significant support for each of those divisions. Comprehensive planning and urban design, because they're not dealing with federal programs, they're the ones who are most primarily funded out of the general fund budget. We'll go into a little detail in that in a minute. But total budget is about $41 million. Approximately 95% of that is funded out of federal funds. These are the changes from the FY10 fiscal year. You can see we've cut, with the cut of that position, the receptionist position, we've had an almost 40% cut in administration. A significant increase, 15% in community development. That's largely due to increases in federal grant funds that we received in the last year, the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, and then also an 8% increase in CDBG funds have bumped both of those up. Comprehensive planning and urban design, a relatively minor increase there, and then the reduction in urban redevelopment caused by that, the loss of that Planet 2 position. That does equate to a 12% cut overall in our general funds.
Russell, the neighborhood stabilization funds, they're for 3 years?
We have to have it committed by September of this year. We have until 2012 to expend all the funds, and then it rolls over depending on how we actually expend the funds. So if we sell properties, then we're able to take those back. We have a 10-year time frame in all if we land bank properties.
But the staffing reduction, as the years go on, it's just apparent that we'll have to reduce or eliminate staff.
Yeah, if there is no alternative source of funds, then at that point in time, we'll have to cut staff. I'm expecting that either that program will evolve, or that our other funding sources will become available. So we'll have to deal with that when.
But we're safe for the next 3 years?
We are safe for the next several years.
Okay.
In terms of the funding source, as you can see, the majority of our funds, over nearly $28 million, comes from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, a relatively smaller proportion from the Environmental Protection Agency, which runs our Brownfields loan program. The state and local grants is again largely federal. These are pass-through funds. The State Department of Commerce was the recipient of the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, and they have passed those funds through to us. But I think the key factor here is you can see that small yellow piece of pie on the north side of the pie chart, and that's 5.3%. That is the general fund contribution to the total planning department budget. So it's relatively small in comparison with a lot of other departments. And just a little more detail on that housing and urban development money. $27 million is supported through the community development block grant, the home funds. These are entitlement funds that we receive every year. Continuum of Care, which is a competitive grant. HOPWA, the Housing Opportunities for People with AIDS, is an entitlement every year. An emergency shelter grant as well. And then the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, which has been the primary boost of those additional funds, is at this point in time at least a one-off federal program. And as I talked about, those state and local grants comes through the Department of Commerce. So $8 million there, and then $2.4 million for the Environmental Protection Agency for the Brownfield loan program. Types of services provided out of those federal funds, or at least the HUD funds. You can see that it's relatively evenly split there between economic development with 18%, and that's supporting repayments on the Dell project, for example. The housing programs, largely through the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, is a lot larger. It's 40%, 28% for general community development, and then 15% for supportive services such as the homeless services that we provide. just to give this roughly, just to give you an idea of how those funds are distributed in terms of the services that we provide. In the comprehensive planning and urban design line of business, we have 3 programs there we operate: comprehensive planning, current planning, which is a new program that we're implementing, and then urban design and community appearance. And then the current planning provision there is because when the current planning division moved to development services, they have been largely doing the intake on land use applications, but there are a lot of other services that we need to provide to sort of maintain our ordinances, et cetera. So that's the current planning division, which we felt more properly was retained within comprehensive planning and urban design. And that's going to basically play second fiddle, at least for the next few years, relative to the comprehensive plan, which is going to occupy a lot of our time. But as needs come up, and we've seen that with the electronic message display, the downtown sign ordinance, those things, and we will have to deal with that. And we continue to modify our design ordinances so that those are more user-friendly. So those kinds of things will be undertaken through the current planning function. Total budget there is just under $1 million. In terms of the operating budget, which is the majority of that $920,000, that's largely comprised of staff. So 95% of the operating budget is support staff, and an almost equivalent number, an 84% for the non-operating budget. The total budget there is 95%, though, supported by general funds. The initiatives, I'm going to go through each of the lines of business. In terms of the initiatives we're going to focus on in the next year, as I mentioned, Plan OKC is really going to take a lot of our time. As part of that, we have a couple of subsets there. The employment land study, which was something that came to council a couple of weeks ago. That's a $100,000 grant that we received from the Economic Development Agency, and we are combining with that with $50,000 committed by the Economic Development Trust and $50,000 in in-kind services, and that's to help us identify what land we should set aside within the city to be able to support the job-generating businesses. So it's industrial lands, but it's manufacturing, but can also support operations like the AAA and Quad Graphics, which are largely office-based. Transportation model is something that the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, ACOG, have been working on for a couple of years. They are anticipating completion of that this summer, and then we will use that to inform the transportation planning function of the comprehensive plan. So we're going to use that to be able to determine how we should be planning transportation needs within the comprehensive plan, within that 20-year time frame in the OKC plan process. Ordinances amendments that I talked about, the electronic message display signs in the design districts, which was a subset of the discussion on electronic message display. Downtown sign. Downtown is a different animal from the rest of the city, with the larger buildings and it being an entertainment center as well. So we're trying to accommodate a different approach with downtown signage. It's more liberal than the rest of the city, and that is something we'll be bringing forward in the next couple of months as well. Appearance standards, this is to deal with appearance corridors within the comprehensive plan. There were no ordinances that addressed those corridors, so the appearance standards is a way of addressing that, as well as neighborhood streets, trying to find a better way to design streets within subdivisions so that they support our larger goals of creating a community that is more efficient and has a higher quality of life. Then the historic preservation regulations and guidelines, they have not been revisited for several years now. There's increasing demand for those to accommodate green issues, and so we are using some funds out of the American Recovery Act to support a revision or an analysis of those guidelines to be able to accommodate some of the green objectives that we have. So largely that will relate to windows, but it also relates to materials as well. So we're trying to be a little more user-friendly for the market out there who would like to be green and still meet their historic preservation objectives.
Are we seeing more and more of those issues before the HP
I think
Commission?
most people are trying to do windows, at least, that are thermal windows, and the historic windows are usually single pane, so we're trying to find...
So it's a balance between the
trying to find a
and-
balance there.
Good.
And this is something that's being considered on a national scale, so it's time for us to look at this. Other initiatives, green infrastructure is something that the Planning Department has been working on for a couple of years now in concert with largely Public Works and their Stormwater Division. We're trying to improve water quality in the city so we don't get repeat incidences with the triathlon that we had in the river last year. But just water quality in general, and this is updating best practices for stormwater management, and it's largely, it is going to be primarily a voluntarily driven approach. We're trying to encourage developers, and we've been approached by a lot of developers who would like to try and use a greener approach in their subdivision. And this is a way of removing some of those barriers that we have. A lot of the existing ordinances actually prevent or make it a lot more difficult for people to do green development. So we're trying to remove those and then provide some guidance as well for people who would like to do it. So that will be coming forward to the council within the next couple of months as well. We will be completing, we're undertaking phase 2 of the Downtown Historic Survey. Last year was focused primarily on the downtown core. This time we'll be focusing on the Midtown area. And we have 2 additional phases for this. This is funded out of the Certified Local Government Funds, which is federal funds from the Department of Interior that are passed through the State Historic Preservation Office. So that's, again, being funded from an alternative source, and that's going to help us in terms of the design review that we do in the downtown area, and then just general development within downtown. A new initiative that we're pursuing this year is proactive historic preservation neighborhood approvals. Instead of them coming to us and applying, we're going to go out into the neighborhoods, and we're starting with Jefferson Park and Paseo, and we're going to run a weekend or a Saturday blitz, basically, where people will market this, and then people will be able to come in and get all the administrative approvals for all the smaller work that they do on their properties. So this is a way of trying to be a little more proactive and make HP a little more user-friendly. And then we all continue to work on the Mayor's Roundtable. That continues to grow and be more and more successful every year, largely due to the Mayor's leadership on that. But that does take a lot of work to manage, and Aubrey Hammondtree in my department has done an outstanding job of managing that for the last several years, and we will continue to be working on that.
And that program does pay for itself.
Sorry?
That program does pay for itself.
Yes, largely. Yeah. It's become revenue neutral. Leading for results, one of the issues that we have to deal with is our ability to be able to incorporate sustainability principles so that we can promote a balance amongst economic growth, social issues, environmental health, and financial considerations. And we have a couple of strategic results that relate both to the comprehensive planning and urban design line of business as well as the urban redevelopment line of business. One of the things with the planning department is a lot of our initiatives are much longer term, so we don't have that ability to be able to provide LFR measures on a yearly basis. These are measured over several years, and you can see by that first strategic result there, by 2013, we hope to increase business and residential area activity in the downtown area, and we will evidence that by an 18% increase in property values. Now, clearly, we don't have full control over that. It's a market-driven issue, but I think all the work that we've been doing in planning department to support downtown development, this is one thing that we can at least measure through county-assessed values. And another, what we consider to be an important priority is to try and focus more development or facilitate more development within the inner loop. That helps in increasing density, and I guess that would also talk to some of the issues we were discussing earlier in the day in relation to transit. Density is one of the major limitations there, and this is a way of trying to support that objective. The Urban Redevelopment Division, total budget there of $9 million. Most of that does come from other sources from the Environmental Protection Agency. We also have a relationship with the Medical Business District, and that's been a very successful partnership there. Try to be as creative as we can in trying to secure funds there. So out of a relatively small operating budget of just under $500,000, that funds majority of staff, and then we do have some staff also out of the non-operating budget. Total general fund component there for that $9 million is only just under 13%. Initiatives that the Urban Redevelopment Division is going to take on in the next year. The Commercial District Revitalization Program, which is a new program we implemented in the last year and is targeted towards main streets and older commercial areas, has a number of benefits, I think, this program. One, in terms of supporting the redevelopment of these older districts, such as the Plaza District and Capitol Hill and Western Avenue. And I think that the efforts that we've provided to those districts so far has been very successful, and we would like to continue that and to expand that and to facilitate the private sector being able to take the running on these areas. We get them up, we help in getting them up and started, and then we develop that momentum, and then they take the running with it. This is also important, I think, in terms of, one, the neighborhood identity that these districts provide, the services that they provide, and also a way of generating more sales tax within the city so that we're attracting people to spending their money within the city itself. And a lot of these are older areas. They have some character to them. Development of similar areas around the country, around the world, have been very successful. So it's not as though we're stretching out here. This is something that is a proven model from elsewhere around the world. We provide a lot of support for the business improvement districts, which is also aligned with the objectives of the Commercial District Revitalization Program. But we provide a lot of support for the downtown bid, and that is up for renewal this year, as well as the Capitol Hill and Stockyards and the Western Avenue bids. And we anticipate that we will be able to provide support for some of these other districts as they mature enough and are able to raise enough funds to be able to support a business improvement district. And then the Brownfield Loan Program, this has been very successful, supported redevelopment of several buildings in the downtown area, put a lot of money into the First National Building, the Dow Center, as well as some other larger brownfield areas for supporting the downtown air park. And we just received another $200,000 grant recently as well. Our program is considered a model around the country, and the EPA have committed to us that as long as we keep spending the money and achieving results, they'll keep giving us money. So it's a nice relationship there. We did a lot of planning over the last 10 years that was largely focused on the downtown area. And we have a lot of recommendations coming out of those plans that we would like to focus our time and attention on in the next couple of years in implementation. Core to Shore is a very long-term plan at up to 50 years, so that's going to take a lot of our time and commitment. With the MAPS project, the park, and potentially the convention center being part of that plan area as well, we're going to have to put a lot of effort into supporting the development in support of those projects. We did a couple of plans in the Bricktown area. One was focused on parking. The other was on trying to diversify the business activity and entertainment activity in that area. So we'll be working with the Bricktown Association and Downtown Oklahoma City, Inc. in implementing those plans as well. Those are both public-private. In terms of the nature of implementation, we'll be limited in our ability with the resources that we have, but we will be working with the private sector so they can do what they can basically to help themselves in Bricktown. And I think Bricktown's got a lot of momentum there, so that shouldn't be too difficult. Medical Business District, as I mentioned, has been a very successful public-private partnership for us. Recently selected somebody for redevelopment of the old Red Cross site. That site is now being cleared. And after that, we'll move on to additional projects there. But a lot of activity going up in that area, new businesses continuing to open. And I think it's really hit that critical mass where a lot more people are showing interest in the area now. Downtown Strategic Initiative is something we've been working on for a couple of years now. We've still got another year or so to go with that, but this is really trying to coordinate all those existing plans that we've done in the downtown area, making sure that we remain focused on those things that are going to give us the biggest bang for the buck for the limited resources that we have and the private sector has. So its intent really is to be holistic in its approach, but remain focused on those things that are the most important for downtown in the future going forward. Community Development Division, we have 3 programs there. Community Services, which I mentioned, includes a lot of the homeless stuff that we do. Grant and loan management takes up a lot of administrative time. There are very onerous and significant requirements from each of the federal agencies that provide funds to us in terms of the management of those funds, and our staff do an excellent job in ensuring that we remain in compliance. We've been in compliance on CDBG for a long period of time. We had the Office of Inspector General in our office for 3 months. They were camped in the office for 3 months, just left, and we got a one-page letter report on that which said everything is fine. And I asked them, is this common? And they said no. So they just dealt with another one that had 27 findings. So it's not easy. A lot of different programs to manage there, and staff do an excellent job on that. And then neighbourhood revitalisation of the services we try and provide through the Neighbourhood Improvement Program and support for the Neighbourhood Alliance and others as well. The total budget, as you can see, is significant, $30 million, and we have 20 staff there, so most of the funds that there is no general fund within the support staff within the Community Development Division. There is some there for Neighbourhood Alliance and other partners that we have, but we do a good job in maintaining that at only 8% of that total non-operating budget. So a fairly good return on taxpayers' funds in that respect. Initiatives for the next year will continue work on the Neighbourhood Stabilisation Program, another program that we've received numerous compliments from the federal government in terms of our implementation approach on that, and we remain on target to meet all of the federal timelines for that. We received recently notification that the Department of Commerce were going to reassign us from elsewhere within the state another $666,000 as well. So more money that we can insert into the local community, the better. Comprehensive Community Development Strategy is a new initiative, and this is really an attempt to try and identify what those gaps are in our delivery of services as outside of what the federal government is supporting. So you'll be hearing more about that in the future. We continue to try and work on our delivery of housing assistance programs, trying to be able to support more people for less funds. And we'll continue to work on the homelessness issues. This Neighbourhood Stabilisation Program has been very helpful in that respect because the Westtown Resource Centre is now under construction, and we've also recently assigned funds for the day shelter as well. In terms of leading for results, obviously we have a lot of issues that affect quality of the community, poverty and homelessness, etc. In terms of the 2 strategic results here I'd like to talk about, increasing home ownership is obviously critical to the stability of neighbourhoods, and those areas within the neighbourhood revitalisation strategy area are more stressed than other parts of the city. We have targeted a 40% ownership ratio there, and that, as much as anything, is to ensure that we maintain the stability and that it's not declining. And in these current economic times, we seem to be on target to not only meet that, but even perhaps to marginally exceed that. So we think that's a significant accomplishment. Homeless, obviously the end result there is always to try and ensure that people enter into permanent housing. We have a target of 75% of those people that we help to remain in permanent housing, and at this point in time we believe we're going to hit 94% in that respect. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, Sam and then Brian.
Russell, in one respect, the fact that the total planning department budget is relying on about 5% general funds is a comfort at this time. But on the other hand, there's got to be a great deal of uncertainty with the dependence on the federal funds that amount to 95%. I think it would be instructive to the council at a later time if you would take a look at our comparative cities and just give us a big picture of their planning departments and how they break out with respect to federal funds versus their general fund support. Not specific programs, just the department as a whole.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay. Brian? I don't know what number slide it was. It's probably somewhere around 11 or 12. It talks about the ordinance amendments to downtown signage. And your comment was making the downtown signage, especially in Bricktown, more liberal, which doesn't typically appeal to me. But why does it seem that we need to have two different standards for businesses downtown versus businesses in the suburbs? I mean, why would our government be putting restrictions on two different sets of businesses?
So you're dealing with much larger buildings, for one thing. So to be able to, for a business to be able to display who they are on a building the size of the high-rise that we have downtown, we think that's appropriate. I mean, one of the other things that we're working for are also addressing the use of banners in support of events. So you saw a lot of banners in downtown in support of the Thunder, so that's something we want to address. People want to look at projecting images on buildings as well, so we're considering that, and then people stick things on sidewalks. There's just a different type of signage that people like to use in downtown areas, and so we're trying to look at how to accommodate what seems appropriate and what isn't appropriate, because a lot of those things are not currently covered within the overall sign ordinance. So,
well, the issue though is that just because they like to use that doesn't necessarily mean that whoever determines that it's appropriate. And a great example is the one I brought up before about the banners at MidFirst Bank supporting the Thunder.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an illegal banner. However, it seemed that everybody was probably somewhat supportive of using that. So my point is that just because somebody's in downtown and they want to use a banner to support something, then why would a business in the suburbs or in some other part of the city not also be able to use that type of signage? And I understand if there's a 50-story building and you want to put a 30-foot tall by 100-foot wide sign on the top of the building, in proportion it's relative. But the idea that somehow standards are different because they're in downtown, I don't think that that's right. I don't think you should put businesses in the suburbs or in some other part of the city at a disadvantage to liberalize the rules for downtown. I mean, if we're going to make the rules in downtown that you can project something on a building, then somewhere in Southwestern they should be able to do the same thing. It shouldn't matter that they're just in a different location. It should be the same for everyone.
And that's a policy issue that'll be coming. And that's a policy issue that'll be coming to council in the future, and we can debate that, the pros and cons of that.
I think there are issues of scale, and then also downtown is oriented to being a pedestrian environment as well, so there are different ways of communicating with pedestrians rather than driving traffic. So those are some of the other considerations that are being taken into account.
Any other questions for us? Let me make one comment, Mayor, if you don't mind, on that last point. In an environment where you're more dependent on traffic for your business, then that would lead me to believe that you are more dependent on signage for your business. And so it's almost the reverse. You're saying we need more signage in an area downtown where people are walking versus where they're driving, and I think that it's completely the opposite.
No, we're not advocating more signage. We're just advocating there are different types of signage being proposed, so we're trying to address those. And there is that issue of scale. We're not going to facilitate massive signs just because you have a massive building face. It'll still be respective in terms of scale, so it'll be a similar scale thing that you see in the suburbs.
Mayor,
yes.
just a couple of comments. Russell, I really want to thank you for taking this focus on HP and some of the issues and standards, particularly as it relates to more sustainable and green options for some of our older neighborhoods. I really think it will make a big difference, making this a little bit more user-friendly for some of our neighborhoods, so that's wonderful. And just another comment, you didn't gloss over it, but I think your department deserves so much credit for this clean audit from the Office of Inspector General. It's very complex. I certainly recall sitting on the Citizens Committee for Community Development Block Grants, and just the process to go through of monitoring all those grants and making sure the money's spent the way it's supposed to be is huge. And it's like getting a clean audit on your financial statements. So really, to be complimented for that. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Russell, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn the Finance Committee, reconvene the council meeting. We're on item 3A. Item 3A is a public hearing regarding the fiscal year 2010-2011 budget.
Craig Freeman's going to give us a quick update on where we're at in the budget process and go back on some of the germane points. And at the end of that, we'd be happy to answer questions. But then I'd also like to get some feedback from council as to potentially some as we're wrapping up and looking to adopt a budget next week, as to some thoughts that you might have into any modifications you'd like to see in next year's budget. Not voting on that today, but some suggestions so that staff can prepare something for us to bring back for next week. Craig?
Jim, do you want me to pass over the individual information on the cities? And the information's in the packet. You mean to just pass over that to move along?
Yeah, we'll run a little late. We did put some information in there. A lot of you have interest on what other cities are doing, and so we've got about a half dozen examples of some things that are going on with other cities that are actually quite interesting. And the bottom line of that information is that there's a lot of cities out there in our region that are comparable cities to Oklahoma City. They're doing very similar things or more radical things than we are this budget year.
Okay. Basically, as Jim had talked about before, we did get the June sales tax check, and so we finished the year on our sales tax about $19 million below the original target. We've talked about the fact that the recession's ended nationally, but there's still just a lot of uncertainty within the economy, which causes us to be in a position to be much more cautious. We are still in a position that we are one of the largest, we have the lowest level of unemployment of any large metro area at 5.9%. And nationally, I think it's close to 10, just a little below 10, and so we're in a very good position in that way. If you look over to, I think it's on slide 9. We'll skip down to slide 9, looking at our sales tax. And on the sales tax, basically, this is a slide we've looked at several times up to this point and through the year, watching as we've seen the decline. And you can see that the April check was still a decline. It finished 14 consecutive months of decline. May was a very strong check, and we saw June now is about 2.9% growth. It's above 09, but it's still below fiscal year 08, so it's good news. It's a good thing for us, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're out of the woods and that everything's back on track to normal growth. Our normal growth for sales tax is 4%, and so we're not really back to a normal yet, and we don't know that this will be a continuing trend. We're hopeful that it will be, but we do have a ways to go to come out of that. If you look at the next slide here, this just shows how FY10 sales tax revenue compares to the previous fiscal years, and you can see we're still $4 million, and our sales tax collections for this year were $4 million below fiscal year 07. So like we've talked about rolling back, our revenues have basically rolled back 3 years. This demonstrates that. We've now finished the year on sales tax, and that is in fact the case that we're below fiscal year 07. The next slide here is another one that we've looked at, and I think you all definitely understand this and have talked about it a lot at the Horseshoe here, about the fact that even if we get back to normal sales tax growth, what this does is projects out our next year's projection on sales tax, and then if we got back to normal sales tax growth of 4% and maybe a little bit below 3%, you can see you have to go to fiscal year 13 to get back to the levels that we had in fiscal year 09. And so that's if we get back to normal growth. That's not necessarily a projection at this point. It's just to say if we go on a normal growth pattern, that's what we'll see. Looking at our budget as it was proposed, the general fund budget is $333 million. Our total budget overall is about $876 million. We did bring, because of the difficulty of this budget, we brought two budget options forward. The first option, and both options rely on MAPS 3 use tax funds to help preserve public safety services. Both of the budget options do. Option 1 assumes compensation concessions for all city employees. It enhances public safety services by increasing adding 20 police officers and 10 firefighter positions, and it eliminates 21 non-uniform positions. In Option 2, it does not require concessions, results in greater service reductions, including public safety. It's 100 positions that are eliminated, 51 uniform and 49 non-uniform. Because of the fact that Option 2 can be implemented unilaterally without having to have the concessions on employee pay, employee compensation, and benefits, then that's the option that was put forward in the budget document. It's the option that we expect to be voting on next week when we come back. Because of the fact that we don't have union negotiations settled at this point, Option 2 is really the option that we're focused on right now, and that will come back to the council on the agenda next Tuesday. Option 2 has, go to that next slide, Option 2 has staffing levels of 4326. That's about a decline of 100 positions. That's on top of 37 non-uniform positions that were eliminated in the mid-year, and it does result in 22 police officer positions being eliminated, 29 firefighter positions, and 49 non-uniform positions. So we just wanted to take a few minutes to wrap up on what we have in the budget right now, to be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yes, sir.
I have a question for either you or Jim to speak to, all right? I've been in some conversations with some folks over the last week, and Jim is aware of this. Firefighters, positions, uniform positions, Option 1. Today we have so many firefighter positions, Option 1, that are budgeted, so many positions.
Yes, sir.
If Option 1 became a reality, would every one of those uniform positions that are today be uniform positions next year?
Yes.
And in addition to that, we would be adding some number of uniform positions in addition to that to the firefighter force.
For the firefighters, it would be 10 additional positions, so beyond the budgeted number of positions today.
There is some information out there that's contrary to that, and that's why I want to take the time for you guys to address that. So
the same as in the police department, only the additional number would be 20 for next year.
So in the police department, there's X number of uniform positions today, and if Option 1 is selected, is able to be implemented, then that will be increased by 20 positions.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Derek.
Some of the things I've been hearing in emails, we've all been getting some emails and concerns, and there's a lot of things that are being cut from this budget, from this present year's service levels, most of which are undesirable, whether it's cutting people from the IT department or whether we're cutting back the 51 public safety positions, uniform positions, or whether it's transit routes or fish hatcheries or cut back to swimming pools or all the other things that are out there. There's a number of things that were being cut, and most of which, again, are not desirable. And I did mention we had this discussion earlier in the meeting about the potential for a few $100,000 of additional services that could be there. And we would like to bring back something to you in an orderly fashion next week for you to vote on. And so I'm looking for a consensus. What I'm hearing is, and please, maybe I'm hearing wrong, is a desire to bring back a reduced orange route of some type.
You wanted a consensus?
No, I'm not looking for consensus. I'm just, these will be voted on next week, but items at least that you're asking to bring back. And I'm hearing that we'd like to have the 40 and 9 extended hours brought back. And I think I'm hearing that we would like to have some level of Metrolink brought back, Sunday services or beyond. I'm a little unclear as to where we want to go with that, if anywhere. And I'm not sure if there's other things we want to bring back also. But again, we have limited funds as we go forward. As I'm taking a page out of Mr. White's book and being very redundant here.
Mr. Manager,
sir,
I would like to, yes, in reference to the Metrolink, but if Mr. Kane could provide us with the ridership, and I think there was some dispute as to the ridership on weekdays as opposed to Sunday and the evening service. So.
Okay, we'll bring back information on that and the other two things that I've outlined.
Sunday service and to the extent possible, the 7 p.m. to 12 midnight, to the extent possible. And that may be limited, I realize.
Larry? And I'd like to include here, Jim, some options on the 2 routes, all right, that we added bus service to. I'd like some information. Did we add just additional rides during the day? Did we extend the hours? And is there any way to tweak that on those 2 routes? Okay.
And Jim, I believe what we discussed with regard to the orange route was simply 2 days of service, Friday and Saturday, for some period of hours that would attract the most riders.
Okay.
At the risk of being struck by lightning, I'm not as concerned about the Sunday to church bus service with Metrolink as I am the back and forth to work service, to be frank with you. I think churches can provide service to church much easier than employers can provide service for people to work for them. I'd just like to look at the Metrolink services where the ridership is, as opposed to, I mean, it's nice to be able to provide people a ride to work. I really do. I mean, ride to church. I think that's a good thing. But I'm not so sure government, that's a real role for government. I think jobs are a lot more in line with what we ought to be looking at.
Yeah, but many of those people probably work on Sundays, the kind of jobs they have, weekends.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful that we don't
exactly
cut it.
Exactly. I would like to look at it more from a job standpoint than I would from a going to church standpoint.
You might use that same criteria.
Anybody else that wants to be struck by lightning can join me in that.
We might use that.
It may be Sunday. Sunday may prove out.
Yeah, but we may use that. We might want to use that same criteria on the routes 80 and 40. If they're not job creation detrimental to jobs, maybe we can suffer a slightly reduced level of service in order to keep jobs flowing.
Right. It is my understanding that 8 and 40 routes are very, very heavily job.
I understand that, but will the additional service provide less job-related transportation? That's my point.
Well, I just want to clear that up then. If we could just get the numbers, and sometimes, you know, you mention religion and you really start getting into a bad situation of debate. And first of all, there's a lot of people that worship on Saturdays. And so I think as far as that issue, I would just like to see the numbers in a whole as it relates to the ridership on, you know, the Metrolink for the week.
I assume that you're bringing this information forward on these comments you've heard here is also going to include how you're going to pay for it.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Do you have a feel for how much money you're going to bring back?
You know, it's a judgment call. I think we're somewhere around $1 million is off the May check. I think the question is whether it's prudent to spend all that the next year. And so if we had the sales tax information as it came in, if we were doing the projections today, we would have an extra $1 million that would be our projected revenue source in this budget than we projected when we presented the budget. And again, the question is, how much of it do we want to spend, and how much of it is prudent to be reserved? I mean, I may have been more ready to spend some of it, and this is just me. I'm not making the policy on this. Last week before I got the June check, and the June check being not as robust as maybe we'd hoped, probably dampened my thoughts of how quickly the economy is recovering.
Larry? Well, let me just ask a question. Just hypothetically, we do something with Metrolink, and we do more than what's in the budget today, based on this, quote, $1 million, unquote.
Yes.
And this $1 million doesn't keep coming in, and in August or September or October, we find that the sales tax revenue is going the other way. at that time, can we not come in and say, time out? In other words, I don't want, but can't we put these particular enhancements, for want of a better word, on probation based on the funds continuing?
I would anticipate we'll do exactly what we did this year. This year we came back and we brought to you and said at mid-year, we did mid-year adjustments because the revenues weren't coming in, and we said recommendations of a myriad of things that need to be adjusted for mid-year. So yeah, we will do the same thing, Mr. Mackey.
Here, we ought to know, at least from the federal standpoint, whether we're going to have those transit dollars that could replace our general fund for the Metro Link.
Yeah, we should know that by fall. And as Mr. Myers brought up earlier, one thing we do need to keep in the back of our mind is that we've got $10 million of one-time dollars in there. And actually, it's more than that. As Mr. King pointed out this morning, he's got $2 million in his operation of ARRA dollars, federal dollars, in the operation of the Transit Department. And as Mr. Bowman just pointed out, we're very heavily dependent upon federal dollars in the Planning Department budget. And then we've got the one-time cash. So we're doing some things, remarkable things we're doing this year because of the financial state we're in. It's like the state using some rainy fund dollars. Well, we don't have a rainy fund, but we do have some one-time dollars we're able to use, some fund balance, some MAP3 dollars, and some federal dollars. But you could have negative replications as we go forward. Okay, I will bring back some options for you along those lines for next week.
Are there any other questions or comments on the budget as we go forward?
There is a hearing, so we should ask if someone would like to speak on it.
Is there anybody who would like to speak on it, on the budget issues that we've presented this morning? This is the last public hearing we'll have on our budget before we deliberate and come up with a final answer. Anybody at all? Okay, very good. I guess we go on to... We have to, yes, well, it's a public hearing only, Gary, so I don't think we have to vote on it. But if you'd like to vote on it, we certainly can. I don't want to... I understand that, but it's also further described as a public hearing. So, motion denied for lack of a second. I'm sorry. Item 3B is enter an executive session to discuss collective bargaining negotiations for the fiscal year 2009-2010 with the Association of Firefighters. Is that, do we need executive session?
I don't believe we need executive session on that issue.
We'd like the motion then to defer this?
We do need it on the next two, but not this item.
Which are the next two?
Well, the next
item C and item D.
This is last year's negotiation.
Okay, the next, okay.
Yeah. We have a motion made and second. Please cast your votes. And the motion carries. Item C is another executive session, and this is the fiscal year 2010-2011 with the Firefighters Association. We do need an executive session for this.
Move to executive session.
Please cast your votes, and the item is moved to executive session. Item 3D is entering executive session on the whole gamut of our bargaining units. Do we need executive session this one?
Yes.
Okay, so we need executive session. Motion made and second. Please cast your votes. And that motion is with the go executive session. Before we go in executive session, we might take care of some housekeeping items here. Items from council. Skip, do you have anything this morning?
I don't know if Wendell is here, but, you know, as we all have had to address issues, and some of them are more passionate than others based upon where your ward and your constituency is, I would like to thank Wendell Wisenhunt and Councilman Bowman for taking a proactive step towards the issue of water activities for our young people this summer. And as a result of that, of course, we've been able to sustain the operation of, I think, 4 swimming pools this summer that has been a real partnership with the city and other outside contributors to assist us in providing some activities as it relates to swimming pools for the summer. And when you look at Tulsa, who's had to close, I believe, 5 swimming pools because of their budget this year, I think that's a real, good partnership of engagement to show that we've had people that has had the concern, and we've had people within our city staff that's willing to sit down and work with them and create an atmosphere for activities for our swimming pools for our young people this summer. So, and Councilman Bowman has been probably one of the most stalwart individuals that has helped in reference to that. And so I just want to thank him and Wendell and all those individuals who have been part of the contributions that has allowed the swimming pools to be open this summer.
Thank you. Meg?
Yes, very quickly, I'd just like to thank my friends at the Watchful Eyes neighborhood for welcoming me so warmly last week. Rose Trova out there does a fantastic job, and I really enjoyed myself. And I did want to make note, Sam, you may do this as well, but I wanted to make note about the Midnight Woofness that our friends at Oklahoma Humane Society had this last weekend. There were 388 adoptions in less than 48 hours. And it broke PetSmart's national record for a 48-hour adoption program. So congratulations and hats off to Christy Counts and Kathleen English in our animal welfare department. It just was a great success. Brian Walters actually said he was there, and there were people online before the event opened, and tents of animals, and it was just a great success. And thank you all for participating.
Thank you. Pete? Larry?
Yes, just like to congratulate and thank the folks at Hilldale for their neighborhood meeting last week that my wife and I were able to attend. If any of you are looking for a program, they had a gentleman from 211 Services out there, and it was a very, very informative presentation of what 211 does and how it can really help our citizens with needs. I'd then like to congratulate David Derringer and Briarwood for being elected Saturday night at their picnic as president next year, and look forward to working with him. Windsor Hills has their annual picnic tonight, and then Musgrave Pennington Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock has their ice cream social, and I believe they're electing new officers for next year at that time. And then if you got enthralled at all with the softball deal that's going on, the Women's World Series, just watching that last night and seeing the favorable light that Oklahoma City is portrayed in nationwide is just really outstanding. And the announcers did a good job, the photographers did a good job, and Oklahoma City really was showcased during that event. Thank you, Your Honor.
Sam?
I hope everybody noticed the price of the tickets. For not having an Oklahoma team in that World Series and to be getting $800 to $220 a seat and filling that stadium up says an awful lot about that attraction, that event. Skip is just of our mutual admiration society. I thank you for the compliment, but it was Mr. Kelly that early in the year rang the bell and said, hey, we've got to stop and look. We looked too late last summer, so Skip, you're the reason we got out there and got started, and I thank you very much.
Gary? No. Thank you. City manager reports.
None, sir.
Okay. Citizens to be heard. We have one person signed up to speak, Ronnie Kirk. Mr. Kirk, if you will give us your name and address for the record, if you'll come up here to the podium, please. And if you could keep your remarks to a reasonably short time, we would appreciate that.
Yes, sir, I will. My name is Ronnie Kirk from the northeast side of Oklahoma City. My address is 2328 North Missouri. When I come down to city council members today, I brought you a profile of all the things I do. Some of those articles have been wrote up in the papers years in the past. Okay. So I just want y'all to know what I do. First of all, I'd like to say we celebrated one of Oklahoma City's oldest citizen's birthday, Miss Norma Kirk, over the weekend. 104 years old, still living by herself and taking care of herself. Second of all, on the northeast side, a lot of people come to me because they know I come down here and fight for the people. We have an inspector on the east side. It's good to clean the city up. She's doing a good job. But she's not treating everybody fairly. She come by my place, 2328 North Missouri, looks over my fence, to Tris Hamill's backyard. Then she goes around my place, finds every little nick and cranny, and writes my place up like I've been abandoned, the building's abandoned. I've been open my one key for 40 years. And then she write up these reports and send them down here to y'all, and now I got to come down and defend myself. The repairs, I don't supposed to come down here next Friday, but I didn't want to be short blocked. Come down here unprepared, so I come a week ahead of time. All the repairs, my repairs, will be done when I come down here. She go by my property, there's a telephone post, 100 feet long, been laying there 4 years. She goes around the neighborhood writing up all the people's for parking in their grass. Goes up in their backyard and check to see if they got a black tag on their car and tell them it ain't no good. She don't even know what she's doing. This is a picture of an Oklahoma City police car parked in his front yard on the grass. This picture was developed by independent source and with the date on the back of it. It was taken yesterday. I've been in business for 40 years at one location. Y'all are doing a great job fixing this town up. It's beautiful. My grandkids, they're going to have to grow up in this town. Mr. Pete White, you do a good job fighting for your district. Everybody loves you because the decisions you make reflect on us. Because our representative don't do nothing for us over there. I know he's passing the word down, clean the city up. But the inspector, she goes around telling them, that's her east side. She's going to clean it up. She gives people 2 hours to move a car. I know they got 10 days to go move a car off their property. She gives them 2 hours and ride back and recheck it. She go by and walk up on their property, go in their backyard and check cars.
Mr. Kirk, your time's just about expired. And if you could sum up very quickly, you have a hearing scheduled, I believe, next week. And
yes, sir.
That would be the proper time to discuss these.
No, I came down to discuss these pictures today with the police car. My hearing don't come up to next week.
If you'll leave those pictures with us, we'll be glad to look into it. But we can't discuss your issue here today because it was not on our agenda. We heard your comments.
No, I didn't come down to discuss the ones I have. I just bought these pictures.
Carr, thank you very much. If you want to leave those pictures with us, we'll be glad to look into those. But the time to discuss the zoning officer's issues are with your hearing date. And I would recommend that you be prepared to discuss them at that time.
Okay.
We appreciate very much your coming forward, but we can't take any action this morning on what you suggested so far because...
No, my hearing is next week.
Next week, yes, sir. And I suggest...
That's the reason I put that paper for the cities on the back side.
Okay, we need you to show up next week and make the same case at your hearing.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks a lot.
Council will move into executive session right now. Thank you.